That's really well. So this one we will use. Yeah. So first line. Let me just. But even though from the standard, you do understand the bullshit. So the first thing that I did is every day. That is. Basics for so we're getting a hard piece. Basically, there's a step when you change the animation that's all because this that you already have the confidence enough to take the chance. You need to understand it. So yeah, it's an important step forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. So this is quite awesome. Yeah, it is like that.
And then once I've mastered the pronunciation, it's great. So you take care of now I just everything. Everything.
Even the car.
Whatever discussed would have
Say that. And in French, there's also that. Yeah, that is that. Yes. Most European languages on kind they very masculine. Most of our feminine Spanish are masculine expression.
yeah, that already got something a little bit late, so
For example, for us, bicycle.
I was a bit nervous when I was checking in with my scoring, but because the headline there is like, oh, if you check
The law.
I actually paid for check.
I think
Seat you pay, it's like that one's 30. I was like, okay, whichever one doesn't cost anything, it doesn't exist.
everybody looking for when you start
I just because that's what I'm worried about. It's like, yeah, it's like 30 minutes. I'm like, okay. That's just like,
made it worse.
I think it's problem with all of those airlines. It's like, here's your base class, and then it's like, it's almost like, do you want to see?
I mean, let's go
That's the type of thing. Yeah. If you go for the basic package, you just kind of stand in there. Yeah.
switch up.
Yes, the chicken.
I go in.
Yeah.
So you've done quite well, right?
Learning something.
That's fun. Yeah.
Things like that. Yeah. So yesterday.
Informal. So informal.
Courses are.
Hi. Hey, so you want to say okay? So I know what to say.
There's so much competition now as well. That's why. Yeah, I think a lot of I'll start to get well.
Hello.
Morning.
Are you Matt?
I'm Matt. Yes. Hey
Or are
everyone.
you
I'm Matt.
Millward? Which is your first name?
It's an unfortunate email. Some people call me Millward, but I'm Matt. I'm Matt.
Marion,
Hi,
hi.
Marion.
Hi. It's my call.
Great, thank you very much. Awesome.
David. Kabir. Hello, Mary.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are you ready to go?
We're ready to go in a few minutes for everyone else is, but yeah, we scheduled to start in 5 minutes, so.
Okay. Oh, it's only 5 to 10. Okay. I raced here for 9. Late for 9.
Oh, shame. Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to live in Joburg, so I know the famous traffic around the side of the world. So yeah.
Actually, the traffic wasn't bad. I was just trying to fit in a million things before, but it turns out it was 15.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it was not.
Okay, let's see. We're going to start in 2-3 minutes. Everybody grab a spot.
Just sit somewhere else.
Oh, it's just
Okay.
Well, these two is us, but even if it's not your name, just sit down. Don't worry about it. Space for everybody.
Loki wanna sit there. Who's sitting there?
He's Gary. Angela. Judd.
Sorry, I may have taken someone's place over here.
No worries.
Who's first?
Sorry about that. Yeah. Yes, so we're going to record the session, and the slides will also be available. So, the slides don't have a lot of information on them. They're really just talking points for us, but the recording will be very useful to go through again.
Oh, that's scary. Gary, I'm sitting in the chair.
Sounds like they can. Hopefully, everyone can hear us. Yeah. Oh, good. Thanks. So,
I have a piece of paper here with it.
On how to say
Get your names. I'm Nicole.
What's your last name?
If you
Innocentia.
Yeah, with pleasure.
and you want it,
For me,
Yeah.
people don't know how, especially with the button back to
absolutely no,
don't know how
no problem. Yes. Yes.
What's written back to that?
That's it.
no, it looks like the camera's going down that way at the moment, but yeah.
Not your just having provisions for
You can just about see, yes, a few hands.
exactly.
Yes. Maybe. This should follow the direction on the camera, right? Okay.
And also just.
Okay.
Yeah, sure, sorry.
Cell phones off, everybody. Good morning, good morning. I would like to introduce you guys to Matthew. He has a background in networking and systems operations, working with customers ranging from startups to large enterprises. This included work ranging from network and system architecture, operational support, installation, and migration. More recently, he has built his knowledge around cloud computing and building skills across many different disciplines such as DevOps, analytics, machine learning, and development. He has a very keen interest in automating things and using artificial intelligence and generative AI tools and services to streamline processes and operational tasks. So please, Matthew, everybody welcome him.
Thank you very much. Everyone, great to see such a good interest in this as well. So yeah, this is a wonderful topic, something that's very near and dear to my heart. So we're going to spend the next few hours together talking a bit about artificial intelligence. We're going to go in a bit of a whirlwind around the history of our AI, how we've arrived to the point now where we just open up any news channel or news article and everyone's excited and talking about AI. So we're going to talk about what it can actually do for us and look at some actual real world scenarios that can actually be used to get the most out. Right, so the slide presentation will be shared with everyone. We are recording the session as well, and it is being transcribed. So if you do want to go through this again at a later point, you're more than welcome to. Yeah.
Sorry, I heard a ping coming in.
Oh, so I need to admit someone else here, perhaps. Sorry. Yes. Thank you for that. Sorry. I haven't seen.
Maybe it's me hallucinating.
No.
Transformers are not.
There was someone who requested to come in, but I don't see the request. Right. I'll try again. Well, I'll let them in if I see them again. Yeah. Let's see. Thank you. Right, everyone. So let's have a look at the agenda. Let's have a look at what we're going to cover over the next few hours together. So there are really 6 main topics I want to explore over here. First of all, just to get a bit of background in terms of how we currently are using artificial intelligence every day in our lives, to some of the kind of common ways that we interact with it, whether we're using a mobile application on our phone or utilizing some other type of web or other resource in the world. We're then going to talk about, a lot of acronyms there, artificial intelligence, ML, machine learning, DL, deep learning, and eventually that's going to lead us to a discussion around generative AI. So normally nowadays when we talk about AI, we're pretty much talking about Gen AI or generative AI, but there are still other types of approaches that are available for us to think about using. So we want to make sure we understand the differences and the relationship between those different technologies. We're going to talk about how generative AI is based very heavily on the usage of foundational models, which we call FMs, and large language models. So we don't use LLMs for every Gen AI requirement, but normally if there's some kind of language or text processing, this is a very effective way to actually handle that. We're also going to talk about how you can get the most out of your generative AI experience by talking about a new discipline that's been emerging over the last few years called prompt engineering and prompt tuning. So this is really about how you're going to ask your generative AI to complete a task for you or to generate content for you. And there's some really simple little tricks that you can use to get the most out of those experiences. So we're going to talk about some of those techniques. Quite an important concept from a business perspective, just in terms of thinking ahead, thinking about some of our engagements we're going to have with our own customers, is the responsible usage of AI. So we'll talk about some of the standards that are attempting to be developed right now, but also just talk about how we can plan ahead for making sure that we can meet those requirements, meet those responsibilities. And yeah, we're then going to just talk about how we can really unlock the value of AI, look at ways that we can actually use this in our business in a real way. So we want to kind of go beyond just this idea of, hey, I'm generating a fun image over here. We want to actually see how we can use this in a real way. But we'll talk a bit about the strategy we could apply to unlocking that. Right, so to kick things off, let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, everyday in our lives, and yeah, just some of the experiences I think that most of us can relate to. Oh, sorry, thank you for that. It looks like people. Oh, I'll be honest. Thank you so much. That's probably what happened earlier. Yeah. Don't need AI agents, you know. Thank you so much. Right, so we're going to talk a bit about artificial intelligence in everyday life, and really just a couple of things to consider over here. We've actually all been using artificial intelligence daily in our lives way before people started getting very aware of generative AI. In fact, it's a very old computing discipline. And it's something that we don't necessarily always think about, but it's really with us regardless of how we interact with technology. So typically, if you start thinking about how you interact with social media, you can obviously go ahead and post whatever you want. You can read what other people are posting. One very important thing that social media providers have to look after is making sure that they don't have any toxic or harmful content. We also start thinking about how we can use those platforms based on personal recommendations, based on personal experiences, to actually start connecting to different brands, to start connecting to other people. Digital assistants, one of my favorite use cases for artificial intelligence. So when I get home after a hard day at work, one of my favorite things to do is to cook a meal for myself and my wife. When I'm cooking, I can't cook by myself. I have to use my digital assistant.
Right.
So I've got a smart speaker, Alexa. She will actually go ahead and play whatever music I actually ask her to play. She manages the timers for what I'm cooking, so I'm not going to burn anything. And I can even get Alexa to start a quiz up for me so I can test out my knowledge on other kinds of topics. So again, yeah, just, everyday interactions we have here. I think everyone here is probably going to use some kind of streaming media service. So we think about all those video services, all of those audio streaming services, and very often they're going to employ artificial intelligence in order to give us more personalized content. So since you like this particular show, since you like this particular, these following shows, we recommend you maybe try this out. So recommendation engines are a very common use case for artificial intelligence. Healthcare, of course, starts to see the ability to diagnose issues in patients, diagnose any other types of medical conditions, in some cases with greater accuracy than you would do just with the human eye. Right, so again, something that's really been explored in the last few years. Smart homes really is just the extension of those digital assistants. The idea, again, where we can actually start to use voice-activated commands, natural language processing to communicate with components in our own house. So turn off the lights, turn on the supplies, and so on. And again, just more on the machine learning side of things, something that financial institutions, something that law enforcement agencies use all the time, is artificial intelligence and machine learning in order to identify if there's a potential crime or potential fraudulent transaction that's taking place. Right, so we'll talk about the background to how all of these things can start to happen. But this is really just even the tip of the iceberg. There are many other examples of how we do this every day, or how we use this every day. So something that I like to check out at the beginning of each year is the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report. This is a really good insight into what's happening across different industries, what's happening in terms of future labor force requirements in a global setting. So this is based on surveys and responses that come from all over the world. And it's a really balanced view, really interesting way to see exactly how these types of changes are going to affect our lives. So over the last few years, we've started to see this is predictable, steady rise in the interest and the importance of artificial intelligence and big data or data analytics. So if I recall, back in 2022, that was a number 15 priority. It's now up to number 4 as one of the top priorities for most companies in terms of what they're looking for in their workforce. Heading out towards, or with an outlook out towards 2030, this is essentially the top list requirement to have a look at. So yeah, really good resource to go and read through. Again, I don't know if everyone here is a fan of reading these kind of 100-page, 200-page long documents. I love doing it. I'm just kidding. So what can you do instead? AI. Let's just generate a summary of that. Right, so that's actually something you can go and try out right now. Right, as we're talking about this. Anyway, let's move on. So artificial intelligence is something that we actually currently use and that we have been interacting with all the time. But what I really want to do is give us a bit of a background to how we actually got to the point that we are today. So what was the original kind of development of AI? How did things start to change? And what kinds of approaches do we use today? So I don't want to address the full historical timeline of the development of AI. We could probably spend a couple of days just talking about that. And while the history of technology is interesting, I want to make sure that we kind of keep on topic over here. But it is important just to understand this idea that AI isn't exactly something that's brand new. AI is really about as old as modern day computer science is. So in fact, one of the big heavyweights of computer science, one of the primary contributors to it, is of course Alan Turing. So apart from the work that Turing did during World War II, in terms of helping to crack the Enigma code and starting to build the principle for modern day computer science, in 1950, he very famously invented the idea of the imitation game, the idea of a test to see if something is artificial or not. So the term AI didn't even exist then, but the test to see if something was AI or not was developed in 1950. So that landmark concept there in 1956 at Dartmouth College, this is actually where AI was first actually coined. There were actually some really interesting developments around about the 60s, kind of going very early into the 70s around AI. And then what we experienced, sadly, was what we call the first AI winter. So the AI winter basically was a case where there was a lack of interest and therefore a lack of funding and then a lack of research into artificial intelligence. This did start to gain momentum again, though, in the 80s into the early 90s. Unfortunately, there was a second AI winter that actually came about round about then. But a lot of the groundwork, a lot of the discoveries that were made during those early years actually paved the way for what's been happening since 2000 and into the 2010s now, and obviously into the 2020s. So this idea of kind of really pushing machine learning, getting to this data-driven approach is really a major turning point. And this is one of the most important advancements that kind of led all the way down to deep learning that led to generative AI. So we'll talk about what I mean by knowledge-driven and data-driven in a moment. It's essentially just this idea where instead of creating an artificial intelligence that performs one particular task that you're going to code out using your language statements, so if-then logic, for example, in a programming language, you're actually going to say, I've got a set of data. I may already know the results of certain data points and a particular value that I'm trying to kind of predict, or this could be something I know nothing about, but I want to examine that data. I want to look at the relationships between it in order to start getting insights. So there's an analytical component that comes in over there, but we can also use that to actually start predicting certain values, predicting certain answers. And this is really where this kind of started snowballing. Right, so by the time we start looking at 2011 into 2020, this idea of starting to create autonomous AI agents really started to get a lot of popularity. So the idea where you could actually give an agent a particular persona. So listen, agent, you are a mid-level engineer in this discipline, or you a junior level administrator or manager in this particular field. These are the requirements that I have for you, and go. So again, some really interesting stuff you can start to do there. Right, so what I want to do is just kind of build up this picture around where generative AI fits into the bigger picture by, again, just exploring those different types of approaches there. So AI really refers to any kind of technique that allows your computing system to mimic human intelligence. Just remember constantly the phrase is, AI is not the same as human intelligence. Some people like to say yet. So there is a prediction in terms of where we're going to go with the technology. I'm not sure personally, how long it's going to take to get there, but where we start talking about the idea of artificial general intelligence, AGI. So this is where we start looking at true autonomous AI. Right, so that's probably a little bit far away, but I don't want to start saying things like that and then next year it's available and you say, oh, look at this map now, this is what he's talking about. All right, so again, we kind of just looking for those developments. With AI, remember that the approach here is knowledge-driven. So in other words, as a computer scientist, as a programmer, as a developer, I can basically write code that can actually start mimicking or actually following a particular behavior or thing I'm trying to do. So whether it's trying to make a cup of coffee, you think about it, we all know how to make a cup of coffee. We go up to our kitchen cupboard or to where we store the mugs, pull the mug out, put it down. Now, here's where the problem starts. What happens if you open the cupboard and there's no mug in there? now you have to go and check the dishwasher. Again, I'm just kind of spitballing here, but the point I'm trying to make is when you code an AI, this is the kind of challenge you're going to run into. You've got to think about if that happens, and so on. So it gets very complex. The bigger problem, though, is that AI is fit for purpose for a particular task. It's not something you can easily adapt to do other stuff. Right, so what's the big change in that? The switch from knowledge to data. So a data-driven approach is the basis for machine learning. Basic concept here being that we're trying to take an existing set of data, we're trying to search it for patterns that can influence certain kinds of predictions, certain types of values that we're trying to actually compute or trying to solve for. So very basic requirement that you could have. Let's say you want to recommend a product to one of your customers. Now you could get your business analysts involved here. They could, for example, start doing clever things with your data. They could start generating dashboards, queries, and kind of giving you those insights. But what you could also do is you could take that same data, you could build a machine learning model. You could then on the fly actually just punch in a potential new customer's requirements and then actually get in real time that recommendation. But now, obviously, the quality of the data is what really matters here. The problem as well is that the nature of data is that it's not always going to be as useful as it was perhaps yesterday. So we have problems related to how stable that data potentially is. So machine learning does have one potential flaw or one major flaw that I picked up when I worked with it. And that's that it's quite a volatile artifact that you produce. So a model you train that's going to be able to figure something out for you could be useful for the next 6 months. It could also potentially be useful for the next 5 minutes. So it just depends on the type of problem you're trying to solve for. Machine learning does have some limitations as well. This is fine at calculating a particular fixed targeted value. So really good at working with numbers and text. It's not really that good when it comes to working with more complex data structures. For example, voice, video, images. When we start getting into that realm, we start thinking about deep learning. So deep learning, or DL, says we're going to use more complex patterns, more complex calculations or algorithms in order to figure out how we can actually identify certain features within a particular image or within a particular piece of music that we're listening to. The idea here is that we need to take that data, we have to turn it into a number of different vectors. So it's very hard for us to kind of visualize what this would look like. If you think about your traditional kind of graphs, what you're going to have, of course, is you're going to have an X and a Y, kind of coordinate over there. So when you have a third dimension, you can go with, an X, Y, Z. You could have a fourth dimension, like time. When we start talking about deep learning, imagine that instead of dealing with 3 or 4 dimensions, you're dealing with millions or possibly billions of dimensions. So like I said, it's very hard to try and visualize what that would look like. But the basic idea is that the type of technologies you use to encode this is actually what's required in order to solve these complex kinds of problems. So if you take a particular set of image data, you're trying to identify in that image, which of these things is a chair, which of these things is the table, which of these things is a customer. This is actually what this can go ahead and do for you. So deep learning is based on the idea of using neural networks. So neural net is really based on the idea around how we're going to simulate a nervous system or the way that a nervous cell actually behaves. All that means is that we have multiple steps or stages that we go through in order to actually do these calculations. So when you're looking at things like speech and image recognition, this is typically what we require. Now, as we'll see in a bit more detail just now, there are really 2 types of deep learning that we work with. The first one is going to be discriminative. Literally, it just means I can discriminate, in other words, identify differences in something that I'm looking at. So when I, for example, have someone speaking, I can discriminate individual words from the sounds that they're speaking. I can discriminate, for example, different sets of images within a picture. The other approach you can take with deep learning is generative. Literally, generative means we're generating, in other words, creating new content and new ideas. So Gen AI is actually just a subset or type of deep learning. Deep learning is a subset or type of machine learning. Machine learning is a type of AI. Right, so just to kind of get that kind of picture down there. I do want to go through these concepts very briefly at a high level again. I don't want to get too technical with the stuff,
Mhm.
but it's important just to have some of these concepts down. Just to understand, when you're talking about AI, we're not just talking about Gen AI. We could be talking about different types of approaches. And in fact, solutions that we can actually use in our business today could use a combination of these approaches. So they're not mutually exclusive.
Mhm.
So you can combine these technologies. All right, so let's talk a bit more about AI. And again, just a very simple example of this every day in our lives. If you use a search engine to go ahead and search for a particular topic, this would be really just a type of AI that's in action or that's being used. The reason we can say that is artificial intelligence is trying to mimic human intelligence, but we know that if we have a casual conversation about a topic, if I mention that topic to you again, you're not going to have any kind of ambiguity in terms of what I'm talking about. So as a silly example, by trade, many, many years ago, so more than 20 years ago, I started my IT career as a network engineer. So when I talk to someone about networking, I don't mean meeting people, making connections. I mean pulling cables, plugging them into switches, configuring devices, and so on, right? Now, you can imagine that if I go ahead and put a search into a search engine, if I type networking, what's it going to give me back? It's going to tell me, hey, here's a result related to how you're going to meet people. No, that's not what I want. I want computer networking.
Yeah.
So I could refine the search, but this is where search engines are quite smart. I think we just take this for granted, right?
Mhm.
But if you notice that if you magically just search for something based on maybe something you've looked at before, right result for you. How? It has that context. It understands the context of what you've done previously.
Mhm.
Very cool. All right, so remember that AI is not the same as human intelligence. Very often, this is going to require a few extra types of requirements or a few extra things that we have to look for. So an AI system is typically going to focus on trying to seek a particular goal. So in the case of the search engine, getting you relevant search results. It may need to use additional data processing to achieve the goal. I know this is a hot topic. We all do worry about privacy. So who's collecting data about us?
Yeah.
But this is unfortunately one of the ways that we can get this tailored experience, right? Why do we get certain advertising sent to us versus other kinds of advertising? Because of the fact that we have this data processing, we have this information ready to go. And of course, data gathering could also be used to better understand the goal. It's not a data-first approach, though. That's the important thing to understand here. But already you're going to start seeing the value of that data, and this is really what led to this development of machine learning, totally different way of doing things. So let's talk a bit about ML and see what it actually does. So machine learning is essentially just a kind of AI that's going to use machines to search for patterns in your data, which is actually the important word there. And it's going to go ahead and build logic models automatically for you. So when you start working with machine learning, what you're going to have is you're going to have a set of standardized models, ways to actually calculate or figure out certain values that you want to predict. Now, if you use a vanilla model, it's going to probably give you pretty good results. But if you want to get really accurate results, you want to train that existing generic model with your own data. So in other words, we want to modify that standard type of model by actually feeding it our data to get it skewed or biased more to what we want it to do. Now, there's a trick to this, of course. If we make it too biased, the results aren't going to be very useful. If we make it too general, it's also not going to be very accurate. So this process of building these models, of training these models is very iterative. In other words, we repeat it over and over again. Sometimes you strike it lucky, you get a good model artifact after just a few tries. In many other cases, it's just this constant, kind of requirement where you have to keep training models over and over. So a silly example of this. Let's say that you had a hotel chain that decided we want to figure out how to order fresh fish for our customers based on, how the customers are actually coming in through to the restaurants and so on. Let's say the hotel chain is based in a very wonderful climate. Let's say the Maldives, and it's just, this like wonderful temperature year round. Imagine taking the data from that particular set of, customer behavior and applying it to, let's say, a resort here in South Africa. Now, we know that during certain times of the year, South Africa is a wonderful place. Times like this in July, it's quite cold. I know you won't say it when you look at me because I'm not wearing a long-sleeve shirt here, but yeah, it's quite chilly now, right? Right, so again, that seasonality of that data, the context of the data, this really does matter. All right, so let's talk a bit about how you're going to go ahead and do this. So a data scientist would essentially go ahead and take a machine learning application and use that to create a new model. This is going to typically require a bit of knowledge of coding, quite a bit of knowledge of how to work with data. Anyone here who remembers studying kind of applied mathematics or statistics?
Yeah.
That really helps you here. So what you're essentially going to be doing is you're going to be taking your existing data and you're going to be using it to modify or essentially add bias to that generic model. So you're going to tell your application that you're using to build out this model where your input data is. This will then actually determine, or more importantly, you need to determine the problem you have to solve. You would then select the machine learning algorithm that's best suited to solving that problem. Now, there's lots of obvious documentation, best practices around this kind of stuff. You'll find that certain models are better suited to certain types of workloads that you're trying to deal with. What you then do, of course, is you take that trained model and you use it in your application. So there are two very important things to watch out for just with this wonderful script that they're showing us over here. Determine the problem that you're trying to solve for. That can be challenging in and of itself. Often what you actually have to do is you have to figure out what type of business problem are you trying to solve. You have to then ask yourself questions like, can this be done? Do I have the data? Is the data of high enough or good enough quality? So we can't necessarily just solve any problem. We have to really spend some time looking into this. So often it involves exploring the data initially before we can make that decision. Just remember as well that when you train the model, you're not going to just do this once, hope for the best, and it just works. Again, it's that iterative process. We're constantly refining, figuring out how to get the best possible model for our requirements. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Yes, I think actually I feel lost. Ne?
Okay.
Okay, let me make a practical example
Sure,
to show
sure.
that if I understand.
Absolutely.
Okay, currently I'm in the confectionery space, and this year I launched. I'm selling frozen dough for scones and biscuits.
Cool.
And the problem that I might say I'm solving is convenience for people that don't have time to bake at their own spaces, right? So when you say machine learning, what machine is it? Is it my phone or is it my laptop? Best?
Very good question. Sorry, let's take a step back. And yes, and again, just for everyone, please feel free to ask questions at any point. We're here to learn. So I think maybe many people are wondering exactly what you said.
Yes.
So the machine isn't a physical machine, it's a logical machine. So think about it this way. Imagine that I actually decided I'm going to get some, cogs and wheels and, widgets, and I'm going to kind of build a calculation engine. And I can, kind of customize it to exactly what I want it to calculate. The machine we're talking about here is essentially that same idea, except that we're obviously just doing this purely with algorithms, with math, and with code. So it's a machine in terms of it being a code artifact. So it's almost like saying, in the same way with a file, you could essentially have a model. Models very often can actually just be implemented as a file, a series of files, or a combination of different things. Yeah, but that's essentially what that machine is that we're talking about.
Okay.
May I try to add something? Imagine an app.
Okay.
You open the app in your phone, and that app is running on your phone. It's running thinking there, right? So that algorithm, that thing that is doing, is the machine learning algorithm. But it doesn't need to be in your phone. The same app, YouTube, Netflix, can be on that laptop, or it can be in the cloud. So what he's saying is that it's not something related to the physical.
Okay.
It's a thinking. So this replicates that thinking and encapsulates it in that app. Let's call it.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's perfect. Great. Thanks for that. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So let's explore this a bit further, and I think this may also just kind of clarify this a bit better for us. So a machine learning model is essentially going to be made up of a series of rules, or steps if you think about it that way, which is what we mean when we talk about an algorithm. Now, again, this can be a very crazy concept to throw around. A lot of people in the first year algorithm think, what is Matt talking about here? So we're going to look at that as well in a moment. But essentially, the point of the algorithm is to try and identify and show the relationship between your existing data, so your input data set, and the targeted output value you're trying to predict. Right, so what is an algorithm? Well, we use this every day of our lives without necessarily thinking about it. How would you build a jigsaw puzzle? Okay, so some people will say, I just start matching pieces and go for it. That could work. Not that it's impossible. But I think we all know the general technique, right? Put all the tables out on a nice flat surface. I'd recommend a tray, so you can kind of move it around as well if you have to. What you then do is you sort the pieces. So you can do different kinds of sorts. You can sort as edge on edge. You can do a sort which is based on color. So put all the blue bits for the sky together, put all the bits for the sea together, put all the bits for the ground together, depends on the scene you're looking at. And once you've actually done your division, you can obviously then start actually putting this together. So in fact, a lot of the decision processes that we make a lot of the time every day that we just take for granted are essentially just going to be based on this kind of idea. So the machine learning algorithms you're talking about here are obviously a little bit more complex and dense than this. There's some pretty serious math that gets involved. But the point is that those models are essentially going to help us figure this out. Right, so let's talk a bit about deep learning. So machine learning is really useful if you're dealing with a set of features, in other words, values that you already know about something or someone, or even if you don't know the particular value that you're going to be after, you happen to be able to explore the relationship between things. So if you think about credit card fraud detection, how does it get done? Well, it's just basically based on picking up that there's an anomaly, there's something weird going on that we can't really account for. For example, if I see a customer that's suddenly purchasing something in the middle of the night that they don't normally purchase, that's a bit suspicious. If the GPS coordinates of where the purchase is made are not somewhere where someone normally would travel to, that's also going to be a bit of a red flag. So more of these features that kind of start correlating with each other will start giving me this idea that there could be fraud. Now, believe it or not, what a lot of your banks had to do, I know this because I used to do a lot of support work for the banks. I would drive through late on a Sunday evening through to BankServe. So that's where all the bank switching happens for all the big banks in the country. And they had teams monitoring, because I was there at 3 a.m. doing work, because that's when I was allowed to do my work. They had teams monitoring screens all night long, kind of watching for these types of telltale signs. So again, with machine learning, one of the benefits you get here is you can start to automate some of those processes. You can also very often do it with greater accuracy than a human could actually potentially get. Right, so just something to also think about there. So what does deep learning then do for us? Deep learning essentially says, instead of using fairly simple machines, very simple models, we're going to instead start building our deeply multi-layered artificial neural networks. Now, a neural network is essentially just going to be made up of a very dense set of calculations that have to be performed. The reason we call it a neural network, it's actually modeled after or based on the idea of how a nervous system would be organized. So in other words, it's not going to just be a single thinking cell. It's going to be a concept of how we relay information between a highly connected system. Right, so there's a bit more complexity involved here. Essentially, these models can recognize complex patterns. They can give you very accurate insights and predictions. This is used when you want to look at something that's going to be a lot more complex to deal with. So for example, if we start looking into problems like identifying a particular part of an image, identifying a particular set of words while someone's actually speaking. So while I'm busy having my voice transcribed during this call, this is the kind of thing that we could actually apply a neural network approach to as well. Now, I mentioned before that there are two types of deep learning that we typically think about. The first one is discriminative. So according to this kind of scenario here, apparently a shark in a lion is not a pet. I guess if you're a James Bond villain, maybe it is. Right, so yeah, dog and cat is a pet, lion, shark, not a pet. So we can discriminate, we can kind of figure out which subset of things we're actually looking for. Then we get generative models. So with the generative model, we're going to actually create new ideas, new content from existing data. So we could synthesize a new image. For example, imagine if I said I would like to build an image of a lion, cat, dog, shark. I don't know about everyone in the room. I would not like to encounter that in the street. It would be pretty terrifying, right? But this is the idea. We're generating something new. We're generating new content over here. Let's talk a bit about Gen AI. What is it exactly? What are the building blocks of it? And let's talk a bit about this idea of foundational models and large language models. So I note a lot of acronyms coming your way. But just remember, just kind of keep it at a high level. We've got AI, we've got ML, we've got deep learning, and now we're looking at generative AI. This idea of generating new content, new ideas. All right, so imagine if we just took a deep learning approach to doing things that could build very complex, very kind of largely organized and connected data sets to try and solve very big problems. Let's say the problem that we wanted to solve is, I would like to learn everything on the internet. That's quite a tough thing to try and figure out, right? That's probably not a realistic task. But what if we are going to do this using a manual approach? Well, there are a few things we'd want to consider. First of all, we'd want to start thinking about the structure of the data that we're going to examine. So let's just say it's web pages, just to kind of make it simpler to kind of deal with. We have to think about how we're going to store that data. We also have to think about the time it would take to process all of that information. So let's make some reasonable assumptions. Let's assume that we're looking at about 5.74 billion, say 6 billion web pages. And let's say that it takes, on average, a human to examine a web page about 53 seconds. You're looking at about 5 billion hours of work, which is about 225,000 human years. That's, yeah. So there's something to keep us busy, right? So that's if one person are doing that through this very manual approach, right? The point is that what foundational models can do is they can be trained on data so rapidly because they have so much compute power, so much storage capabilities, that they can actually handle this kind of number crunching in a few months. And that is actually quite shocking to kind of think about, the fact that we can actually do this, we can do this so quickly. So foundational models are really what we start thinking about when we start looking at the likes of the well-known AI providers out there. So the ChatGPTs of the world, the Crocs of the world, insert whatever name here, these all are based on this basic idea. The way that it works is that they would have their data scientists actually producing and creating these foundational models. The idea being that we could then use them as the basis for our requirements. What's interesting though is that because these are actually based on such large amounts of content and data, these are very adaptable. You could also, for example, have these taken and actually be massaged into a form that's used for a particular requirement. So some of the models could actually be better at working with video data, at working with natural language processing. Others, though, could also remain very general. So daily, what I use when I'm actually doing support work for my customers is I use a lot of adaptive foundational models, specifically used for coding. So these help me to generate code really rapidly. I'll let everyone in on a secret that's not so much of a secret. When you work in IT as an IT professional, a lot of the time things are not going to work. Hopefully you'll get an error message. So we do what everyone does. We Google. You put in the error message. The first result that comes back says, if you get this, try that. So I have to go through those search results, go into forums, get a snippet of something to try, copy, paste. Okay, that didn't work. Let me try the next thing. Where I find a lot of value in using these coding assistants, but we can do this obviously for other types of Gen AI apps as well, is to just kind of take this kind of shortcut. So essentially, you go Gen AI platform and you go and do that search for me. You give me the results after. It just saves me this kind of manual effort that I have to go through. And this is going to be a massive game changer for a lot of people. We'll talk about that impact as well that we want to think about going forward. A lot of that will be speculation, I think. I wish I had a ability to predict the future. I kind of do with Gen AI. All right, so let's have a look over here at foundational models then. The foundational model, or an FM, is essentially a type of model that's actually going to be based again on this very large deep neural network. The density we're talking about here is absolutely crazy. So for example, some of these models are open. You can actually download them and use them as they are. I'm honest. The basic idea over here is these are going to, again, be made up of billions of parameters. So for example, quite an important generative AI model, an open source model that was released a few months ago was DeepSeek. Created a little bit of a stir in the world and in the industry. The reason why is most of our machine learning processing, most of our deep learning processing is going to be done not by traditional computer CPUs, so central processing units. Instead, we tend to use distributed processing units, and believe it or not, graphics processing units, GPUs. So anyone who's into their computer gaming, yeah, we can do lots of other things with those computer gaming platforms with that hardware, with those video cards. You can use it, for example, to crack encryption very rapidly. You could use it, for example, to generate various kinds of cryptocurrency coins or tokens. And we can use it for this type of code processing very effectively as well. So basic idea here is using this large amount of hardware available is, of course, allows us to build out these models. So going back to the DeepSeek analogy or kind of anecdotes I mentioned earlier, the reason DeepSeek caused such a big split is that the claim was it did not use specialized hardware. In other words, it didn't use distributed processing units. It used much cheaper hardware. It was actually such a shock to the world that the stock price of NVIDIA almost tanked overnight. So it did recover, don't worry. But yeah, just to show you how closely people are following this kind of stuff. So it's very interesting to see what's happening there. So how does a foundational model get produced? Essentially, what you need to do, of course, is have that set of data scientists pre-training that particular model. This could take weeks or months, mainly because of the volume of data we're dealing with. So we're not talking about necessarily everything on the internet, but we're talking about taking in or ingesting, for example, the entire contents of the US Library of Congress. And for example, large amounts of open, licensed or license-free, copyright-free, I should say, creative works, for example. And we'll talk about privacy and copyright just now as well, because that's another hot topic with this stuff. You have to be careful of. We then have the data scientists evaluating the model. They would then, of course, go ahead and fine-tune these for specific domains. So they can release something that's better suited to natural language processing, that's better suited to what I use it for, generating code, or that's better suited to a particular task. What's interesting is that what we could also do ourselves is we could take that existing foundational model, and by applying those prompt techniques I'm going to show you just now, by applying our own fine-tuning, we can actually get a lot more out of those systems. So in other words, we can customize them to look at data specific to us and our organization. The same scenario I mentioned earlier, I type that search in Google search for networking. It knows what networking I'm talking about. When I start looking for specific details on how to do something, I'm going to use my own company's internal documentation. You can start to get that kind of integration as well. Right, so let's talk over here a little bit about these large language models and Gen AI. Let's try and answer the question again. I know I've already asked it. What is Gen AI? And we already know by now that it's just a type of deep learning. It focuses on generating new content, new ideas. That's essentially what we talk about when we think about Gen AI and generative AI. Right. Is everyone still feeling comfortable? Are minds being blown yet? If you take a break, still good to go. Okay, let's carry on then. All right, so when you start thinking about a foundational model and how it works, FMs essentially are designed to produce a variety of different kinds of outputs. So what they're typically going to do is they're going to be trained on that very large amount of data. The outputs that they can generate, the outputs that are actually better suited to working with, could be provided based as text data, based as video, and for example, image data, or for example, any kinds of customized outputs you're after. So code generation, or for example, the ability to plug this into our own specific application requirements or business requirements. We also know that LLMs are a kind of foundational model, and these are used mainly for text processing. So when you think about text processing, we're thinking about this idea of taking this large amount of text data, trying to be able to actually identify different elements of it. So you can imagine that when you read an email from a customer of yours, you're going to identify who's the customer, what are they actually asking me? Is it, for example, a compliment? Is it a complaint? So the sentiment of that particular message becomes important. And this is really what these types of models are really good at helping you out with. So they can do things like text generation, text summarization. The summarization isn't just going to be a case of, well, this is the general idea of what was being said. We also want to get those insights. Is this good? Is it bad? Is this, for example, something that I need to act on right now? We can also, for example, use this for conversational interfaces. I think this is what captures everyone's attention. So this idea where you feel like you're having a conversation with someone when you're asking them a question. So, if you want to start analyzing your own data, one thing you could do is you could take your sales figures for the day or the month, put them into a spreadsheet. You could decide to go ahead and start doing clever things in Excel with formulas and so on. Or you can actually just ask your foundational model, your LLM, listen, based on this kind of data here, this kind of information, what's happening over here? How does this compare to what happened last month? Could you potentially forecast what we need to think about for tomorrow? So this is where that real value starts to come in. And yeah, just providing for Q&A capabilities. Internally within our organization, I'm sure that some of you find that you get the same questions from your customers, from your colleagues, from people that you need to actually interact with. The idea over here is that we can use this to actually kind of build those question and answer requirements, or more importantly, create the ability to answer questions on demand. So how do we interact with any of our foundational models? We use a prompt. So in other words, we're going to tell the FM what we want it to do. So you can literally just type it. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Just large, for example, ChatGPT or DeepSeek are large language models.
Absolutely. These are large language models. You do find that some of the functionality within something like a ChatGPT, some of the functionality within other types of providers can kind of start looking at concepts beyond just text processing. So ChatGPT absolutely has those text capabilities, but it's also been extended to support additional kinds of outputs as well. Yeah. DeepSeek is purely LLM or text-based. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't understand what it is you're saying.
Okay.
What the difference is.
All right. So when you look at an LLM, it's specifically designed just for text processing. So whatever prompt you put in, the output is going to essentially be text-generated output. So it wouldn't include image data, for example. So a picture wouldn't include an audio file, 100%. That's the basic. So like I said, DeepSeek is purely text-based. If you look at something like GPT, this can actually do text processing, but it also has been enhanced to support other kinds of capabilities as well. So it's not just purely LLM focused. Yeah.
And what about, now I was trying to look for the name, Microsoft 365.
Copilot.
Yeah.
Copilot.
Because I subscribed for that and thought, great, my life is now easy.
Yes. That's a whole other thing, right?
Possible to use.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that you're going to get it.
Yeah. So on the Copilot side of things, funnily enough, I use Copilot to help me just kind of slap together some of these slides over here as well.
Help me, but
yes.
It was useless.
So,
or maybe I was.
So that's a good conversation to have, right? Yeah. Is that the thing you have to embrace when you start working with these types of scenarios is that it is really a kind of a learning process for both of you. So I don't want to talk about Copilot as if it's an actual person, but yeah, kind of get very fond of these things, But that's the point, is that, yeah, you have to kind of look at these kind of iterative processes. You may find that as you start yourself getting used to Copilot, and more importantly, as Copilot starts adapting to your requirements, you're going to start getting a much better experience. So that's how these things are designed to essentially start working. Always come back to that first example I used in terms of getting the context from how I interact with a search engine, for example. That same type of experience there.
Can I manage the expectations there? Because you went for 365 Copilot expecting that you were going to have an assistant.
So let me tell you what I'm trying to get it to do.
Yeah.
So I had a presentation that's very kind of, doesn't have lovely pictures, very, text heavy. And I said, please take this presentation and, make it look more professional.
It sounds like a weird thing to say, but when you talk about code, when you get things to look good, we talk about prettifying the code. So I would use that word over there as well. So beautify or prettify it, yeah, just kind of make it look good, yeah.
And it turned every slide into something with a whole lot of black boxes on it. It was completely useless. Then I said, okay, so this is my content. Here's a document that has updated content. So I do training on listings requirements.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So there's draft now new listings requirements. I said, review that. Tell me what I need to update in my presentation and please mark it up in red text. It said, "I've finished," and there was nothing. It had done nothing. So I was very disappointed.
It sounds like you need to, yeah.
I thought it was cleverer than that.
Yes. So it sounds like Copilot is about to be fired.
An annual subscription. I'm irritated.
So what this does come down to, again, just to manage those expectations as well, is a lot of those interactions, like I said, will be built over time based on context, but there's actually some steps you can take right now to actually get a better experience. And what it actually really comes down to, initially, the single easiest thing to do to fix this, all about how you actually set up those prompts, the way that you approach it with those prompts.
So it's not learning from everyone else there that's using it and applying that knowledge to what it's doing for you, which I find frustrating.
Sure.
That it has to learn from me individually and from Innocentia individually and from Say individually.
Sure. Well, let me just back up there. But so it's going to be influenced by, again, what your requirements are. But because it is actually very adaptable, it can actually respond to the appropriate prompt you give it. When you write a prompt, we'll get into this just now, but when you write a prompt, what you could even do is you could say, I want to write a prompt almost like a job spec. So I'm going to first of all tell this particular agent, this is your role. You're a highly creative, chatbot, or very creative, don't call it a chatbot. You're a very creative, for example, designer. This is the particular task that I would like you to achieve. These are the preferred outputs I'm looking for. So you can start giving it a bit of guidance. You can even use techniques like negative reinforcement. So for example, if you don't want to see red or black boxes, don't include red or black boxes. You can literally put in that kind of requirements over there. So that's really the key to this. So we will talk about some of those techniques.
As if it's a junior staff member that you have to start from scratch. That hopefully it learns faster.
100%.
Okay.
And again, it's what will start to happen is you'll actually start getting, the knack for how to write prompts. It really is a case of, and I know I don't want this to sound like, so this is going to waste everyone's time because everyone has to go through multiple attempts to get it right. But essentially, once you start getting the hang of how to write those prompts, then you're going to get that workflow working a lot more smoothly. Things have actually advanced so much over the last few years that there are actually models that specifically rewrite prompts for you. So in other words, what you can do with those models is you can feed in an idea of what you want to do. It'll then say, cool, why don't you try this instead? And it'll actually give you a much more, kind of detailed
so is there
breakdown.
Another app that does
There's
that?
an app that'll tell you this is what you should actually be studying this AI.
And you got to pay for that.
That's sort of what you ventured into.
Is there not also an expectation of, because if you want to generate a specific image or whatever, I mean, you have things like Canva or like specialized Midjourney or specialized for some specific uses. So then normally they will use the foundational model, but then they are trained specifically for those specific tasks. So is that if you go to ask for a generalist to solve and do your accounting, and a generalist business person, and then you go and say, do the audit, and he's going to say, I don't know, and you say, well, I paid you. But there are specific auditing that they will use that generic knowledge. So Copilot, and Copilot is actually OpenAI, right?
Yeah.
Microsoft for OpenAI.
Absolutely.
So underneath you have OpenAI. The whole thing I was saying the context is because a lot of people expect that you're going to put Copilot and then it's going to write the emails and organize your life for you, which it doesn't. And yeah, but also the images, and correct me if I'm wrong, now it's much better, the model, but it's not designed for that. It's a generic model. So if you want something very specific, you need to pay for the specific model.
And for presentations, Gamma is a better tool.
Gamma.
It's
an AI presentation builder.
It's a text to presentation.
So I thought it's going to be an
Yeah, but it's a generic model where Gamma is specific for presentations, for text. GAMMA.
Okay.
But there is many others. I'm just giving you the example, the one that I know personally. But
so this is the other thing. I mean, this is something we will talk about towards the end of the session as well. But this is one of the other challenges that we've got right now, is that we currently see in all of these different tech companies engaged in a kind of an arms race at the moment. So we also have to, as consumers and as customers of these different types of offerings, just kind of tread carefully as well. Be careful about just, I guess, getting all of the advertising hype. I'm not saying we should be completely skeptical, but I'm also saying we shouldn't be, kind of completely optimistic. I think a balanced view is quite important with this. Yeah.
So I was in a meeting. So you said that Copilot helped you build this. The reason I went for Copilot was I was in a meeting with a bunch of entrepreneurs, and we were doing a little like role play thing, and he said, "Oh, let me get Copilot to do the presentation for us." And 5 minutes later, he had this amazing presentation using Copilot. But yeah,
that sold you on it right there. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
You just didn't see the prompt that he probably used, which it could be maybe 3 pages long to actually generate a proper presentation.
Yeah.
So yeah, we will. So like I said, we will get into that prompt discussion as well. So that hopefully it's going to get a lot of value for everyone here as well. Yeah. All right. So yeah, like I said, prompts are really the instructions that you provide into your foundational models, and this is one of the easiest techniques, the easiest things you can really start to actually manipulate and master to get really good results. So really what you look at in the example there is summarize steps to process a claim, and then of course it gives us an output. But you can imagine that even though I'm just trying to save a bit of space here with this amount of text I've got here, that's a very vague thing I'm saying there, right? So claim for who? Where am I getting this information from? Is it generic? Is it coming from an internal database? And this is really where we want to start thinking about what we can do with that prompt kind of capability. Right, so they also talk over here about the fact that our prompts can actually be one of the key inputs that we think about, but there are other factors that can actually start to get us an appropriate output that we're after. So for example, when we're actually looking at the inference that we're trying to perform, so the prediction essentially that we're trying to perform, we can tell this particular model, we can send it a question, why did the turtle cross the road? Now, if it doesn't understand our sentiment or where we're coming from, obviously we could get a result that's maybe not fit for purpose. So this could be a legitimate business question. I'm guessing it probably isn't. But if it is, do you agree it's not a good idea to say something like to get to the Shell station? I would still chuckle at it, but maybe it's an important meeting and worried about turtles not being hit by cars and stuff like that. So migration, they migrate between, and there we go. So are we going more factual? Are we going for something that's, kind of more lighthearted? So the tone of that conversation, the tone of what we're expecting is also really important there. So how can we manipulate this with prompt engineering? So prompt engineering is something I'm going to show you in a bit more detail just now. There are many different techniques you can apply. I'm not going to show you all the techniques, because again, we could be here for a long time if I did. But this is something you may want to go and do a bit of reading up on. Look at some of the samples I'm going to show you just now as well. This will give you some really good tips on how to get the most out of this. So if we look at a basic prompt, we could say, describe baking. Well, obviously that's very vague. It's very open-ended. It could give you ambiguous answers. Right. But if we refine a prompt, we could say, discuss baking as an art form. Use the tone of a cooking show host for novice cooks. So this is the thing, if I'm trying to get advice on a new recipe, something that I'm trying to do, I need to make sure that I really sell this idea to this particular AI. So as much as I love to cook, like I mentioned, in my free time, I'm not very technical when it comes to cooking. I'm a kind of a one-pot type of cook, slap it all together and it just works. All the flavors come together, right? And it's just lovely. So this is exactly the same kind of thing you want to think about here. So giving that context, giving the expected output, perhaps even starting to give it some guidance and stuff you don't really want to see. This is what we start to think about here. So the more that detail you can give, the better. Care should be taken as well to balance this out though. So obviously you can go completely, crazy with the amount of detail that you give it there. And sometimes that can give you a result that's not maybe what you're after. You're going to spend a long time trying to actually just write that out. If the prompt you write in is the same as the result you're after, well, you're doing it to work for it, right? Right, so yeah. So how do you adapt your output by augmenting the model. What they mention over here is you could go ahead and use a technique they'll call or known as RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. Sounds very complex, but what it actually says is this. Copilot, I want you, when you're looking at this prompt, to consider the details that I've given you. But I don't want you to just use your own internal knowledge base, your own internal, for example, vectors. I would like you to go and look inside my set of documentation, my internal company database, this particular data set. So in other words, we can on the fly extend the functionality of that model by actually not having it going to look at these different resources. We can actually use external tools. We can use the ability to enhance what it knows about with our own information. So if you've got internal documentation, an internal wiki, this becomes a really useful way to get ready custom results, so targeted results that you're after. So based on your documentation, the steps that I would take would be the following.
Sorry, what's an internal wiki?
So a wiki is just going to be a online encyclopedia. It just comes from Wikipedia. Sorry.
Okay.
No, but ask these questions. Yeah. please do.
Do you provide this personal information? Do you provide them to ChatGPT or no problem?
So this is where things also get interesting. That's a really good question. If you're going to be using a foundational model, the likes of a ChatGPT, obviously going to be very concerned about PII, so personal identifiable information. We start thinking about GDPR, all of those types of concerns, having data that leaks out. So there are RAG techniques that can respect those boundaries so that when they do consult your documentation, they understand you may not have any of this kind of information exposed. This is also going to save you the hassle or the headache of having to actually go and lock down security permissions to say, well, Matt, who he trusts, can look at this particular field in this database, but this software process can't. So built into those RAG tools, into those RAG features, they can actually start to respect those boundaries. So you can actually specify what it is allowed to see, what it's not allowed to see. So yeah, but really good question you asked there. That's a big concern. Yeah.
So Copilot.
Yeah.
Is that going to take my data and potentially use it elsewhere?
This is where we have to be careful. According to the agreement that you have with Copilot, and again, I'm saying this based on, I don't know if everyone reads their software agreements.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we all do, right? Most of them, and that's the thing, it's hidden in there. We'd have to go and check that out. Essentially, most of these platforms that start collecting data from us, from what I've seen, do it in an anonymized way. They start to strip away anything that's going to be, directly identifiable and so on. And a lot of these are also opt-in options as well. But be very careful of the software agreement you agree with anyone, because that can also change at the drop of a hat. For example, let's say in 3 months' time, whatever the technology vendor is, they release a new update. So I've seen that happen, software update. Do you agree to the new terms? Of course I do. So, good example of something to summarize with Gen AI as well. But don't use the Gen AI that you just... Sorry, go ahead, yeah.
No, we have no option but to give them, if you want to be precise with the information you want to get.
This is the thing, right? So this is where you now start thinking about some other options you've got. So if you've got very serious privacy concerns, there are alternatives. You could start developing your own language models. Now, realistically, to build your own LLM is going to require a certain amount of expertise and hardware resources, but they are starting to become more affordable, believe it or not. So we're actually starting to see hardware form factors, hardware platforms being shipped, where you could actually realistically start building out LLMs. There's another big movement at the moment, the idea of building an SLM, a small language model. Actually building it directly based on your own private data. And again, if you build your own SLM, that's yours to use internally. That's one of the ways you can avoid some of those privacy concerns. But like I said, this is, I guess, one of the problems that you have if you start engaging with another software vendor or another company and you've got your data that's going to be looked at.
Wasn't there someone in Silicon Valley that was they were one of these entrepreneurs in many years, they were collecting all the data that the guy generated and all that, and they were just feeding into a model to try and create him, like you will just launch it and make same decisions and reply.
Sure. And I think I think that's the concern, right? No,
It's a clone.
Like a virtual, yeah.
But they're using the big CEOs and they're using that.
100%. So
They're doing meetings with the AI virtual clone. So they're doing 2 or 3 meetings at the same time. One is a real person, the other 2 is your virtual clone that you train with your own data and
They
your own
behave in the same manner.
behave, and even people on the other side don't even know whether they're talking to your virtual clone or they're talking to the real person.
I haven't seen that one.
I read an article about it yesterday, actually.
yeah, so it's a called. So in terms of the big players in this space over here, it's interesting to see, you know, OpenAI and have a look at what's happening with Claude. So that's where you look at a company, the company that produces Claude is called Anthropic. So Anthropic AI, Claude versus OpenAI with GPT. So it's an interesting kind of comparison to have a look at there. So to be honest with you, I don't pick sides. I've never been like that with tech, but a lot of my coding tools I use are actually backed by Claude-based models. So I guess I'm running a roundabout way back in that horse. All right, so let's have a look over here at some other techniques we can apply.
Coming back.
I'll keep
Claiming attention.
So some other things you can do is you could, for example, take an existing model. You could decide that you're going to go ahead and you're going to fine tune the model instead of doing that retrieval on the fly. So that the big drawback with RAG, I don't want to overcomplicate this too much, but one of the drawbacks with RAG is because it has to constantly go and fetch and consult information externally. This obviously could kind of slow things down. Imagine if you keep consulting the same set of documentation over and over every time you actually need a prompt to be processed. So let's say, for example, you have that set of data readily available that you want to use to customize your particular model. What you could do is you could actually take your existing data and you could actually go ahead and fine tune the model. In other words, get the model to actually consider using your data specifically in terms of how it's actually going to provide those answers. This is a very similar idea behind how machine learning itself works. Remember, with machine learning, we take in a generic model, generic machine that calculates how to perform a particular forecast or particular prediction, and we add in bias to it by saying, please consider our data as a very important requirement when you build out the custom model. So here we can do something very, very similar. So typically, you need to find a way to actually get that data out there. Where the concern starts to come in, again, is around privacy, is around exactly which data you want to expose in this way. You may find that certain providers are going to tell you that they're going to anonymize some of the stuff. This may also require that you also clean that data up so that you don't have any PII information. But this, of course, creates other problems. When you start losing some of the PII, you start losing some of the context. Sorry, go ahead,
So in terms of this, I don't remember my agreement when I started ChatGPT. I just agreed and everything.
Sure.
So for instance, I wanted it to properly draft my CV and just improvements needed.
Sure.
So I did upload that, and from then, ever since, it's easy for me to just speak to it because there's part of information about me. So now I'm like, is that kind of dangerous? Because I felt like I've built a basic.
Again, I can't speak for what the current agreement is. I certainly don't want to talk on behalf of OpenAI, but you will find that there are obviously protections in place. I mean, the companies that are producing this kind of software know that if they start just harvesting everyone's data, they're going to have some big regulatory issues that are going to come their way. The problem with it is, though, is that in many cases, it just comes down to but you can trust us, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. So when you talk about responsible AI usage, we're going to talk about these things because this is exactly the kind of thing that I think everyone's worried about. In one sense, personally, I don't care if my data is known to the world. My life is an open book. But that's a very childlike attitude to have because that won't be the case for everyone at all. The other thing to think about is, and this is a very extreme view, I believe that we should have two approaches to data. Either everyone must see everything or no one can see anything. The problem that we have with all of our issues today, all of our security breaches, all of our problems, is some data that shouldn't be secret is secret, some data that's not secret is, well, that should be secret is open. That's actually the problem. We've got this kind of dual state that we live in. Yeah. All right, so let's talk over here a bit about prompt engineering and prompt training. So let's look at some of these different techniques. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Can I ask? Everybody has an issue with their data being out there.
Sure.
But most businesses, we rely on AI to give us certain data and information based on other people's data.
Yeah.
So how are we supposed to build these AI models with these data when we our own data?
So
where
this
it's
is
supposed to come from?
So like I said, this is where that kind of anonymization of the data comes in. So for example, imagine that you're collecting demographic information about your customers. So you're going to want to know things like which area do they live in, what do they earn, for example, and in the household, what type of assets do they own. You could still collect that kind of information without necessarily knowing exactly who you're collecting it from, right? So in terms of their name, identities, date of birth, that kind of stuff. So again, that's one of the ways that we can deal with something like that. But you're quite right. If you feed that data in, with all of those details, assuming that it will be cleaned up for you, I think that's where the danger comes in. So my advice to anyone is I would always look for any kind of data exchange solution that basically scrubs or cleans that data out. So when you use disciplines and skills like data engineering, this is exactly the kind of stuff you need to do. So you want to redact stuff that shouldn't be exposed to anyone. So things like ID numbers, names, dates, date of birth. You could partially redact as well. So you could, for example, do something like, I'll show, for example, someone's first name and first letter of surname. But even that is where people start getting a little bit nervous.
Yeah, but I mean, we've got Facebook, we've got Instagram, we've got LinkedIn. Everybody can access our information there. Why are we so worried about?
It's one of these tricky things. I know.
If you Google your name, you'll see photos from
there was
your footprint on
a number of initiatives that have been there that basically you can delete your data from, you can select where to go the data, and they fail. Why? Because we don't care. Like, who is gonna? We don't care. We say that we care. We don't care. Like, you go, you sign. Okay,
this is
ChatGPT. You sign. You go. You want to use it. The moment that you get, no, there's someone, Maripuri posted whatever. Accept. And then you're giving your data away. I don't think
this is exactly that problem. So it goes without saying, one of the easiest ways to stifle innovation, to get in the way of new technology getting out there, is regulation. Unfortunately, we do need regulation, but it's about getting that balance right again. So when you talk about this idea of responsible AI usage in the moment, we will talk about these kinds of issues because there isn't a clear answer. This is the point. But we want to start thinking about what we can do for our own organizations, for our own customers, for our own companies to address this stuff. At some point, we will start seeing this coming through. We are starting to see legislation being passed in the US, in parts of Europe. So obviously, we just need to start thinking about that as well. Yeah.
The US less, in Europe a lot.
Yeah, the European Union has the first legislation in
the
AI.
whole thing is that who has said, no, I don't accept the cookies when you go to the... Have you ever?
We don't.
And then you go to accept all.
Yeah. I think we say don't accept, your computer shuts down and it's frozen.
I mean, Facebook has between 50 and 100,000 data points on each person that uses Facebook. 50 to 100,000. So you think that there's no data out there for you? So ChatGPT is just, you are lying to yourself. Otherwise, you just got to be offline completely. Don't use any devices, and you can be completely sure that nobody's going to use it.
But I think the point is, organizations and companies, obviously, they want to be more confidential because obviously there is a competition.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So if everything is burning all the data into
the companies too. And data
they can sell the secrets to other companies. Why not?
But you got closed
backdoors are everywhere.
You got closed systems that the data that you use within the system is not going to be
closed or not. That is the point. I mean,
no,
whatever is building that.
So they say
it might have.
What happens with these conversations is that I find after we start talking about this, everyone walks out the room wearing tinfoil on their heads. Right, let's talk a bit about that prompt engineering and prompt tuning. Unless anyone wants to grab a quick stretch of the legs, everyone's still good? Yeah? 10-minute smoke break or coffee break, or I don't smoke, but just in case anyone else does. We all good? Yeah, let's carry on. All right. So, what is prompt engineering exactly? Prompt engineering is how we're going to solve the types of challenges that we were just having this discussion about in terms of, I want the Gen AI to give me this result, and I'm getting frustrated because it's not giving me what I want. And this can happen. And unfortunately, when you start initially working with Gen AI, this will probably be an expected result, an expected experience. Because remember, like any other tool, we're trying to learn how to use it, right? Think about it this way. Think about the very first time you were in front of a desktop computer. So, where do I click? What do I do? What is this thing? And again, I'm not saying that it's necessarily at that level, but it just about is. It's a new tool that we have to figure out how to use. So prompt engineering is one of the best ways to actually start getting accurate results, getting results that are really going to help you out. So prompt engineering just means, how do you actually ask the Gen AI what it is that you're after? Put another way, years ago, people used to give advice on how to Google. This is essentially what we're looking at here. This is essentially the discipline that we're trying to learn here, right? So how do you Google effectively? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we can get the best possible results based on the model's capabilities. We can also use these techniques to bolster safety measures. So one of the prompt engineering techniques we may want to also engage in is making sure that we ourselves, in our result, start hiding information that we shouldn't be exposing. Right, so in other words, when I start getting certain details, certain summarized information from internal documentation or databases, do I really want to include identifiable information for people? Get back into that whole discussion as well. We also want to think about providing domain-specific knowledge without the need to fine-tune. That's where RAG comes into the picture. The domain-specific meaning our own internal knowledge bases, or perhaps you actually want to start pointing the request that you're making to the AI to a particular knowledge base on the internet. And then, of course, getting really high-quality outputs as a result. There are a few different techniques that we can use here. Before we start looking at them, let's look at some prompt examples and let's see what the results look like and just kind of see how this compares when we start to improve the prompt. Here we've got a fictitious company called Any Organization, and the prompt simply reads, how can any organization use generative AI to improve customer engagement across its various product lines and services? Okay, so it seems like a reasonable question. And of course, we get our response coming back over here. So it's telling us, yeah, this is what we can actually start to use if we get an AI assistant going, and just some of the benefits you can get. If you think about what they're actually answering there, though, it's a fairly generic answer, isn't it? It's kind of a cookie cutter kind of response. Let's compare it to a prompt that looks a little bit different. Let's try this one over here. So now, instead of keeping things open-ended, we're actually trying to get a particular targeted answer because we're giving additional context, additional detail. So if you look at that additional detail there, how can any organization use Gen AI to create a personalized onboarding experience for new customers with a particular goal, the goal-seeking concept, a goal of increasing engagement and reducing customer churn in the first 90 days? Churn, of course, where you're kind of thinking about someone signing up and then they're going to, kind of stop using the services. And can we catch that just in time? Could we, for example, take a preventative measure before we have to start giving them better pricing and doing what we can to keep them on board? That kind of stuff. And yeah, we start actually getting some really useful suggestions over here. So it's not just going to say, yeah, this is going to be a generic way to apply it. These are actual actionable tasks we've got to plan over there. So step one, first suggestion, generate a personalized welcome message, give product introductions, step-by-step tutorials, so people don't get frustrated when they start engaging with our products and services. Practically suggest relevant resources, set up video guides, set up FAQs. This is stuff I think we all would probably instinctively think about, but it's amazing just that kind of insight you can get when you can structure your thoughts like this. And that's actually one of the things that's great with this kind of engagement over here. Just literally, what is the plan? So some best practices for general prompt writing. Be clear, but be concise. Right. Again, detail is important, but don't go into massive amounts of detail when you start actually doing the AI agent's job or the AI engagement's job for it. include relevant context as well. So you can literally actually tell the AI, this is your role. This is the context of what I want to achieve. Here's the goal. Here are the tasks that I'm actually interested in. You also want to go ahead and use specific directives. We'll look at that role task concept in a moment. State your requirements, and if you need to, and if you can, provide example responses. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Just
Tested the A. Apologies.
Sorry. No.
Yeah, it's fine. I wanted to see that it's working.
Thank you.
All right. So, as everyone getting into the poll. Sorry, I'm obviously so I probably spent too many years in data centers. Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. So now this is obviously a very, I would say, possibly too detailed example of what you could do. I say it's too detailed because you could go ahead and use all of these elements when you write out a prompt, but you don't necessarily need to. It's just that when you do actually start setting up your prompts, think about if you need to include these elements or not. So the first element they suggest there is, why don't you tell the particular AI that you're engaging with what your role is? So what are you? Are you an experienced business analyst trying to solve a problem? Are you a manager trying to figure out the best way to achieve something? That really starts to guide in terms of where you're trying to get that answer from. Be careful about always going for the option of you are a highly experienced 20-year veteran in this, because that may give you detail that's not really necessary for what you're trying to get. Right, so something else to think about. This is another technique you can use along these lines. Instead of just using a single AI prompt, you can actually use multi-prompts. You can almost set up a virtual team that can actually help solve problems for you. So in other words, we can have one of those AI agents performing the task of this particular business analyst, while another one starts taking on other responsibilities. So you can almost have your own virtual company of consultants working for you, actually giving you this advice.
So I met someone the other day who said that he created a direct.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. And you can give them their own personalities, even their own personas. It sounds like a weird thing, right? But I think to have a balanced view of things, it's actually really useful to, when you're having a discussion with people, to have someone in the room who's going to kind of push back. That's a good thing. It's good to kind of question stuff. Now, when I worked at Amazon, we always used to have our leadership principles. One of the important ones was have backbone, disagree, and commit. So don't back down with your ideas, defend them. But once we've come up with a plan of action, you commit to whatever that plan of action is. If we go and use someone else's idea, you also don't want to get into that world of, you see, it didn't work, I told you so. That's not going to help you. But that's the point of getting, those kind of different voices. The same thing is, you don't want to just listen to my opinion about AI and Gen AI. You want to actually go and do your own research, so get as many different opinions about this as you can. I would say I'm quite optimistic about things. Maybe it's good to have a conversation with someone that's maybe not as optimistic as I am. But just to get a balanced view, yeah. All right, so we put in our role, we put in the task. So again, we can be really specific in terms of the task that we're trying to achieve. We can put in the instruction, and again, you can add appropriate details here. And in terms of the output, you can tell it exactly what you want it to look like. So it may not always be useful just to get this kind of wall of text or paragraphs in the output. Because I'm more technically minded or technically oriented, I do struggle reading long passages of text. I'm a big fan of bullet points. But just really lay it out for me, nice and neat. And this is exactly what you can do. Get it to actually give you the expected result in a format that's really useful. All right, so let's have a look here at some prompt examples. So if we look at this first one over here, write a market analysis doc. Now, the reason that they obviously identify this as being quite a bad example, it's just too vague, isn't it? It's too ambiguous. It's very generic. I mean, whatever response you're going to get back there could be equally as generic. So another example of a prompt. By the comprehensive market analysis, include current impacts and potential future consequences. Here at least 3 business use cases. Use data from leading business publications and resources. And now you can even take that further, such as, and you can, kind of just keep adding additional detail there as you need. So that's the point, is think about it that way. I think it was really well phrased earlier when we were having this conversation, with the group. If you're going to give an instruction to someone to do something, do you agree that if you get an instruction, well, what you're going to get back, or what can you expect? So just think about, laying out very clearly exactly what it is that you're after. Some more examples. Try this one out. So, comprehensive market analysis, business use cases, use data from leading business publication resources. What about this one? Context. So the second we start doing that, we can actually start telling through the prompting exactly which elements we're after. So it's almost like you're writing a job spec for someone. So here's the context, here's the background. You're an AI assistant with expertise in business strategy and market analysis. The task is to analyze our trends in commerce. The output format will include a structured response with clear headings and bullet points. Specific requirements, 3 major trends, list associated impacts, tone, keep it professional and friendly. So again, you can play around with a lot of these elements here. And this is really, again, one of the ways you can unlock some of those features. So whenever you engage with Gen AI, this is something to even experiment with. What I'd encourage everyone to do here is actually try and write different prompts to perform the same task just to see the different outcomes you get. And trust me, it won't be a waste of time. It's a way of actually just getting you used to how you want to engage and get the most out of that AI. At some point, you're going to get to a situation where you don't have to keep trying multiple times to get the expected result. You kind of start getting it first or second time at a kind of the max. Right, so let's have a look over here at a fully optimized prompt. One thing I just want to point out, so there are some other elements we can start to include over there. One thing I want to point out is that, the more detailed you can get, the better the result potentially is going to be. But there will be a cutoff at some point where perhaps you start adding, a little bit too much detail. It could potentially start confusing some of the results that you're after there. But the more that you can elaborate and kind of expand on what you want it to do, the better the expected result should be. So it's about getting this balance right. It's about, kind of figuring out what's going to work best. And like I said, when it comes to prompt engineering, there are specific techniques we'll talk about just now you can use. Remember, these slides are available for everyone. I'll make sure everyone does get a copy. So we are making this recording. I guess we can share it with everyone. And you're more than welcome to use some of these examples here. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the actual tips and tools and tricks that we can use. So some of the prompt techniques that you really want to start to engage with your Gen AI to try and do the same thing with different prompts. This is where you're going to start seeing some of those results that you could get coming back that are different. So RAG is a technique that you can use to actually start augmenting what your current model knows about by having it fetch information just in time from other data sources. One of the data sources you could use could just be a website. It could be an internal documentation data store. It could, for example, be a database. The concept here is when we pull this information from these particular environments, we combine together with the information we have in our current model. The point is that we're trying to get more specific, detailed responses back, specific to the kind of problem we're trying to solve. So think about that example that earlier with a market analysis requirement. Obviously, our own internal data, our personal requirements or in-house styles becomes very important over here. You may want to include that when you get those results. Right, so let's talk about tool use prompting, action-oriented prompting. So you can, for example, get the generative AI to start interacting with specific types of tools or APIs. An API is an application programming interface. Essentially what it is typically a web endpoint. It's got a series of known actions and known responses based on the request that you make. For example, you can create your own application. You can point it to one of the Google APIs and actually ask the Google API, please can you tell me what the temperature is today at the following GPS coordinates. You can actually build your own application, and on demand, you can actually have an action within your app actually retrieve that data on demand. So an application programming interface. Yeah. So this is this idea where almost like how you would connect to a website to go and browse information. So imagine that, just for our own purposes, we decided to go and check out what the weather was today. So we go to something like Gitmo, or we go to Google Weather or one of those websites. When you go to that website and you manually do that lookup, imagine that instead of doing it that way, you can actually do that within your own application or within your own code that you actually write. So in other words, you don't have to create your own set of sensors around the world that are going to figure out, what the weather is at different weather stations. You can just interact with an API that's already got the information available. So APIs exist for just about anything you can imagine. And in fact, there's a whole industry around these as well. A lot of developers make very successful careers out of actually producing APIs that they monetize and that they can actually sell on to other customers and that they can actually have reference by other third parties. So use a calculator to solve this equation. The calculator tool could be a local executable, be another application on your phone, another application on your computer, or it could be a web-driven application instead. Again, many other tools exist where you can extend the capabilities of the AI to doing stuff beyond just looking at your language processing. So a lot of my coding tools that I use for my tasks rely very heavily on this, using tools such as command line commands on my system, using API lookups. Action-oriented prompting allows your AI to actually perform specific actions. So we can actually tell it, I would like you to analyze this data and create a chart. Or the example we had earlier, I would like you to take the content of this conversation or this recording and use it to generate a presentation or generate, whatever it happens to be that you want to go ahead and set up. So when you think about chain of thought and tree of thoughts, basic concept here is you actually just want to, in your prompt, literally type the statement. Think step by step. It's going to sound crazy, but you can actually tell the prompts, or through the prompt, tell the AI environment you're interacting with. Explain this to me as if I was. So in other words, this is how you get that additional context there. So do you want to go into additional detail? Do you want to have a simplified view of what we're getting back? This also allows you to encourage logical reasoning. You could potentially see where the AI is perhaps going a little bit wrong in terms of the response it gives to you. So if you see those different steps, you can correct and backtrack and look at changing how a particular step works. When you look at tree of thoughts, you can explore different reasoning paths. You can also evaluate intermediate steps at every stage. So if we decide to do that complete breakdown, look at this as a kind of a branching paths kind of concept. If you do this, then these will be the results. But if you went down that path, it's going to go into a different way of thinking. All right, so one of the techniques you could use as well is a constraint technique. This is where you use negative prompting. This could be used if you're going through a series of prompts and you're not getting the result that you're after. So let's say some of the results getting back, aren't really fit for purpose. So some obvious things you can say. Don't include profanity. It's not really what I'm looking for this example. Or avoid mentioning specific individuals. Again, privacy concerns around what you want to expose in terms of the answer coming back. Don't use sarcastic or condescending tone. I know that when I normally used to work back in the day, I would be called out for that a lot. Yeah, you can play around with this. Yeah, just kind of massage it. That's what we're doing. All right, so just some general tips before we start talking about responsible AI usage. Again, on getting accurate results. So when you want to get the expected output with foundational model, remember that there's not just one game in town. There are lots of different providers out there. And one of the key things to remember is that they are continuously improving their current models and their provided products. If you really stay on top of this, you may find yourself actually switching between different model providers, different models themselves that you're actually going to rely on every day. Try and apply a machine learning technique to refine your outputs. So those inference parameters, again, give it that context. What's your expected output? What are you expecting to get back? Give it your best with your prompt engineering. Think about actually trying to guide the AI to a particular result that you're after. Think about introducing RAG if you can. Think about opportunities to introduce fine-tuning. Fine-tuning is quite an advanced technique. This will require a little bit more integration with an existing data store in your own organization. So in other words, a collection of documents, a database. You may need to start doing things a little bit more programmatically to start going down that path. This would require typically someone who's got some expertise in data analysis or working with data engineering. You also want to start thinking about employing safeguards to filter out undesired content. That's not necessarily going to be something that's not fit for purpose, something that's toxic and so on. It's also going to include data that you don't want to expose. So privacy is really important. Quite an important element to mention there. It's a standard practice of machine learning to do this actually. Keep a human in the loop. So having some kind of oversight really does help a lot. If you actually just have, for example, all of these results, part of your application and processing, being generated without human review, obviously you can get into some very dangerous territory. Remember, if we're using this for our own internal purposes or our own purposes with regards to something like Copilot, obviously we are the human in the loop. But we want to think bigger than that. We want to think about this potential to use this to automate business processes. So when you automate, you just want to keep an eye on this stuff. And yeah, automation should be used to create generative AI assisted reviews. It's really important just to see that you are kind of on the right track, that you've got those guardrails in place, that you're not again kind of skewing from those responsibilities. We'll talk about responsible AI usage shortly. Sorry, go right ahead. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I've been ignoring their questions. I'm so sorry. That's because I was trying to. It's because I was trying to let everyone into the meeting. I'm so sorry. Okay, so yeah, Tudi, go right ahead. Tudi, you can unmute yourself. I think we can hear you if you do. Or you can type your questions in chat. Tudi, I don't know if you are trying to speak right now. I don't think we can hear you right now. Sorry, do I need to? Sorry, I'm not sure what the audio setup is yet. Sorry. It's just very soft, very faithful. And it should be coming by the speaker or whatever. Right?
Yeah, the speakers.
So Tudi, you are currently muted. I don't know if you can unmute yourself.
Oh, my apologies. Good day, everyone. I'm not quite sure if can anyone hear me.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, thank you. So I have a few questions, and I'm not even so sure as to because I joined in a bit later after the session has started, so I'm not even quite sure as to was the questions that I'm asking maybe were aligned, or maybe they were explained, or maybe touched based on them. So my first question would be that I would like to ask regarding the AI in the business. The question would be that I would like to know how can the small medium businesses practically adapt that AI without a large budget? So that would be my first question. Yes. I'm not sure.
Sure. So we haven't specifically touched on that, and we are going to start talking about some opportunities to unlock the business value of AI just now. But I do want to comment on that. Because like I said earlier in my intro, the idea of small entrepreneurs, especially startups, are very near and dear to my heart. So I want to support, and I really want to encourage people to kind of expand their businesses as much as possible. So there are some alternatives you can use compared to using your paid-for foundational models, LLMs. So when you start getting into the world of using a tool like ChatGPT, you start using Gemini AI from Google, you start using something like, for example, Copilot, these typically are going to have various types of either freemium or premium types of fees. So they're going to give you a limited amount of usage up to a certain point. In some cases, they start charging quite early on. But if you review some of those agreements, you can get a lot out of just that kind of free kind of tier, or that freemium kind of capability. If you go with the open source models, what you could do as an alternative is you could actually download those and you could run those on your system locally. So you don't necessarily need the most powerful computer in the world to run them, because even though the models require lots of processing power to produce, the model artifacts themselves that are produced can be run on relatively smaller amounts of hardware. So you could, for example, download something like DeepSeek. You could go ahead and run it with an integration on your local system. You use a tool like Olama, for example, and you can actually start generating prompts, getting those responses back without having any additional costs associated with that. So there are a few ways you can go ahead and start saving on those resources. What I'll try and do is I'll try and see if I can get a good resource. I'm pretty sure there are going to be blog articles and web articles out there that actually give some really specific advice on how you can take advantage of this. But just off the top of my head, that's what I would just suggest. I'm actually going to show you as a practical demonstration just now a really fun way to get going with Gen AI and to actually build custom AI generated applications without spending any money. So I hope everyone likes to party rock and vibe. I'm going to talk about vibe coding just now. I'm going to show you a really cool website called Party Rock. Yeah, so you're going to check that out. Cool. Any other questions? Go right ahead. Yeah.
Oh, may I proceed?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay. I'm not so sure if I'm still audible enough.
Yeah.
Then my second question would be that what are the keys or differences between this AI's automation versus the innovation?
So I'm not sure I quite understand your question. Can you maybe just clarify for me? Sorry.
Okay, so I'm not sure if the question that I'm asking right now is being maybe answered regarding what you just said with the Gemini and the ChatGPT and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'm not so sure the difference between them, and like my question is actually based on the automation versus the innovation regarding this AI models.
Okay, so by innovation, do you mean just changes that are being made by the providers of the foundational models, or?
Yes. I think I lost.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I do now.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. Yeah, so like I was saying, essentially, because things are changing so rapidly, because we've seen new features being introduced in the space almost every day or every second day, you can be sure that there is loads and loads of innovation taking place. However, that shouldn't hold you back from using the tools right now to actually start getting value, to start automating processes. In other words, you can already start getting a lot of value out of utilizing the services as they are now. And I'm optimistic on this. The best is yet to come. Bit of echo there, yeah. Yeah, so I hope that makes sense, Judy. We will look at a topic around unlocking the business value of AI. So hopefully that'll also start to look at some of those concerns as well.
Thank you. That is so clear. Thank you so much.
I think just pop all for a break. Should we take a quick break, everyone? I think that's always a good sign to an instructor that people are kind of like. So to be fair, and this is just in my experience, it's not always the case, but I would say after an hour, I don't know about everyone. Yeah, I can't listen to people talking for more than an hour. So yeah, let's take a break. Let's make it a quick 10 minutes. Yeah, quick bathroom, whatever break. Yeah, get back in about 10 minutes or so. Great, excellent. Yeah, it's almost scary topic. It's a lot of moving parts. That's the thing, and it's easy to get lost in the details of things.
And the jargon.
The jargon is crazy, the acronyms. But that's the problem with tech right there as well. Yes. There's CNNs and GANs and this.
Do I want another couple of Oh, good thing. I mean, I'm tempted. But I don't want to be bouncing off the roof. So because we have the we found it that's so far. Interesting. Of course. Right. Oh yeah. Do a favor.
Yes.
We're doing a video, a marketing video on how to say desigual.
Yes.
And I need some Spanish accents in my video.
Okay.
Can I take a video of you saying desigual?
Yes, why not? And where are you posting that?
So the marketing team will then put together a video and then we'll push it out on social media.
So if you.
Yeah. So let's somewhere else.
And then total people have on it. Thank you. Not for now. I think because I said it's such a long topic to do. I'm also the following week when I get back. So yeah. I feel like if I don't get my school books, like yeah, then I'm not gonna enjoy China ever. Because you'll be stressing out on school. Yeah. He wants to check so that how you from I can't just yeah. It relax it all okay, so I was not gonna do it. Because the following week when I get back, what are you studying? Salesforce administration. Guidance. It was really something. I started doing sales software engineering and I couldn't. I was like, no, not for me. I was like, it's not for me. And I left it. It's interesting, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And I just couldn't, my brain couldn't like keep all the information, yeah. Because then what ended up doing is that you end up copying from those videos. So like, I'm not
but it's more
things. J-O-D-R.
Are you actually
No, from Valencia.
You want to know. Sorry.
From the east.
Thank you. I'll put some up.
Yeah. On the
I'll build up on that. I know you're covered,
This is the you know the squall of that?
Basically for one song.
Yeah, how long is it?
I only you guys? Yeah.
And I heard you guys that when you got Peter. Like the thing like what half says 120. I forget that's why they had to open it.
I'll be around.
Yeah, and they to
Yeah, for designs.
What happened?
First part. You ask to ChatGPT.
I put my goals and which one is she? Just
We're not supposed to have it.
I'm not so good at it.
So you upload it.
Was at least for the time and
I'm attending.
online.
No, tried the online thing. It didn't work out.
I don't know. People don't want to get graduation.
Like it's graduation.
You ask and you receive that.
We're not going to the page. You should see the group chat. They were like, I think the only 2 people voted for China. Well, there's a lot.
I'm sure.
I'm saying apply for
Okay.
I got the part when we're walking back instead of turning it on. Sorry.
I didn't know
Yeah, we'll do it. Let's do it
for India. The next thing I give it, I neck. It doesn't have 5 minutes.
I think I spent close to 2,000 people.
Let me know when you. Listen, I saw that medical thing. I said, no, I'm not coming to this party because that's why I didn't apply first time around. When they released the July dates, I was like, no, it's I had blood. You're mad. Do you know how much consultation is? I don't know. That's so mad.
We're doing like
I'm not going to wish a business site. I'm not doing it. It's like
How does it benefit between then and
now I'm into the business that I'm doing. I want to export a lot. So that's why I'm holding on.
Also, is your doctor's consultation?
In terms of access.
That was money. Then they're gonna send you for X-rays and then the outreach of that looks. X-rays is another month. I think X-rays.
So I'm still waiting for my product to be tested, ready for retail. Then as soon as it's ready for retail,
so we can apply.
so my friend, yeah, but then I'll be back by you.
Yeah, I think about 150 was the answer.
Oh,
Blood work. No, that's someone
We can upload.
been to consultation with the doctor, which is about.
Yeah.
And said you're not out of pocket because but then I was X-rays and then like I said.
And then you say no.
You know,
Can upload the
maybe like
I think let's get that. So everyone gets spreadsheets.
that's the time.
It's an amazing, kind of status. So that's great. Yeah.
Yeah,
I have like this. So do this like paramount.
I'm sorry.
Right. So before we get into a discussion around responsible AI usage, let's just quickly think a bit about some of the ways we can start using generative AI. Just what the kind of complexity, what the kind of cost factors would be based on how we want to start customizing what we're doing. So essentially, if you start thinking to start using a foundational model as is, you just start using ChatGPT for what it is, obviously you're going to get a lot of reuse out of it. This isn't going to be very complex to initially start working with. It doesn't require very careful planning in terms of how you integrate this with internal data, additional tools that you need to run. When you start thinking about adapting your foundational model, this is where we start getting into the world of using retrieval augmented generation. So in other words, please start getting results from the following set of documents, the following website, the following database, or where we start using fine-tuning. So almost going back to a machine learning approach, where you can actually start to modify the way that the foundational model works, more specific to our own data. You could build your own FM, your own foundational model. This is where we are talking about concerns you may have around specific privacy issues, around maybe have a foundational model that's really, really specific to what you're trying to do. Remember that there is going to be quite a lot of cost involved in this, quite a lot of complexity as well. There is a lot to be gained, and this space is, or this gap is starting to narrow as well. So if you look at big hardware vendors like NVIDIA, they're actually starting to sell compute platforms now. They're not exactly that cheap. You're still getting into the territory of spending a few $100,000 and above potentially. But that's within the grasp of a medium to large size company, as opposed to, for example, having to use lots and lots of very expensive hardware, which will be coming at a much higher price. So yeah, this is starting to kind of change a little bit here as well. But let's talk a bit about responsible AI usage. And this is a very, very interesting kind of territory to look in. I didn't really know if I should approve what images used there, but I thought that was quite cute. You know? Yeah. Right, so let's dig into this. So if you start thinking about responsible AI usage, this is something that's going to be a concern for any of your foundational model providers. So when you actually start working with the likes of a Copilot or ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever it is, they're going to be very clear on what they view as responsible AI usage. Now, there are obviously efforts that are going to be made to try and standardize this, but because essentially you've got these different large technical companies or tech companies trying to do this kind of stuff, there isn't exactly a standard for this. And there's another problem, of course. We don't necessarily want to just agree to exactly what the responsible AI usage is of Microsoft or Amazon or Google, or whoever it is. We need to also start thinking how this is going to impact our own customers, what our own responsibility concerns are. So there are a few things you want to just kind of start thinking around. And I want to highlight a few of these points here. So from a security perspective, we definitely need to start thinking along the lines of privacy and security. You definitely don't want to expose, mimic, or have anything that's going to compromise anyone's private or personal safety. So that's really important to be aware of. It's also very important to ensure that you have a fair representation of that particular output that you're actually going to be. So in a nutshell, making sure that we can keep everyone's data safe, make sure that everyone as well is also safe. The second point, though, funnily enough, where you think about explainability and transparency, is actually something that's not as hard to achieve as you may think. In the world of machine learning, we talk about the concept of model explainability. The reason it's so important is this can have a really big impact in someone's life when an AI makes a particular decision. For example, let's say that you've got a model that can predict whether or not someone can be approved for a home loan. That's a big thing. I think most people will agree that's the biggest thing you're probably going to purchase in your life. So if you get told, sorry, we're not going to give you finance for your home, if that decision was made by a model, you need to be able to make sure it's clear and transparent how it got to that answer. That's super, super important. So generally, as part of our model building process, we actually start building capabilities into the models where you can always work backwards. We can always see how we got to that point. Sorry, go right ahead. Yeah.
So like what the example you just made right now, you can use API, right? Like connect your AI chatbot with the API, like you can go see if it's accurate that you can get
100%. So one of the things you can do is when you create a model explainability, you can actually start looking at different measurements or metrics. So you could, for example, actually start interrogating the model, and you do this continuously to see how accurate is it, how fair is it? Is it actually still giving us accurate predictions? Or is it, for example, starting to introduce some bias or starting to introduce some unfairness? So again, we in a roundabout way, we do use APIs to do that, but essentially we're going to be using automated processes to do that. One of the techniques you can use is you can actually, while you're using that particular model in your production application, actually have a process behind the scenes that constantly is actually just trying to test out if it's doing the right thing. What you can also do is you can take previous prompts and replay them against that AI as well, just to see, hey, are you actually starting to get the same results compared to what you got previously?
basically training.
100%. So it's just part of that kind of process. We actually talk about this idea of model monitoring, but that's actually one of the reasons we do that, is that we want to make sure that we are going to get these accurate results. Sorry, go right ahead. Yeah.
Can I ask? A few years ago, there was this conversation on social media around banking institutions charging people higher rates for loans than they would other assets. And I see over there that there's governance and control. With that governance and control, are there any, measures put in place so that when such things are found, the governance is there, but then what?
There can be proof, there can be transparency, right? So this is again where we have to start thinking about regulations that need to be introduced around this stuff for exactly that reason. Another example that's come to my radar recently, not exactly the same, but in a very similar kind of space. There have been several companies doing independent research on big ride-sharing companies, what the ride-sharing companies have been doing, of course, is they've been charging different customers higher prices based on the fact that they know that they can get away with charging those customers higher prices. So again, it's this kind of idea of why are they using this kind of almost untransparent or non-transparent or kind of opaque billing method? They obviously claim that this isn't happening, but there's data to prove that they are. This is exactly the kind of reason why we need this responsibility, why we need this kind of capability. So on the model side of things, yes, getting that transparency makes sense. I guess the problem is with the banks, you could find that that wasn't just a model prediction that made that decision. That could have been a person. That could have been a bigger problem at the core of the actual, company itself, I guess. But this is actually, I think, quite a good opportunity to highlight exactly this kind of unfairness, this kind of bias that you could start to come across. Very often this could be introduced, unfortunately, into your model as well, based on the data you train it on. Okay, so again, without placing too fine a point in it, if you ever go into any of those models and you type the following prompt, please generate a picture of a physicist for me. I can tell you 99% of the time, it's going to be an old white guy. Guaranteed. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. This is where, again, we have to have these conversations. This is where we have to start thinking about these requirements. Unfortunately, as I said, there isn't an actual standard for the stuff yet. This is why we're going to start thinking about how we can introduce this.
So there aren't any real repercussions to it.
This is the thing. I think it just comes down to, us as consumers obviously calling out companies that we engage with as customers, saying, what is going on over here? Do you have a way to actually explain this? Obviously, the thing to also take into account, and I'm not saying that's the case here at all, this is probably something that really is happening. But we also have to be careful about the kind of control that social media companies have in terms of the kind of disinformation campaigns they can sow. So I'm just saying, just as a balance view, right? So, who's to say? Yeah. All right, so, and then exactly like you said there, when we start talking about controllability, we start talking about good governance, making sure that we've got a framework that stakeholders can use to make informed decisions about which AI systems they should engage with, also providing mechanisms to steer AI system behavior. I don't want to get very political right now, but I just want to mention a very interesting thing to try out. If you download DeepSeek, see what happens if you ask DeepSeek a question about what happened at Tiananmen Square. What happens at Tiananmen Square? And ask it if Tibet is a country or not. So again, you have to be careful of the stuff. These biases can be introduced, unfortunately, based on who's providing us with these models and the data that they're training it on. So you must definitely be aware of that. Yeah.
So ultimately, they are humans training it.
And it's humans who feed the data into these models.
Absolutely. And that comes back to that point, I don't want to kind of harp on the social media disinformation thing, but we know that, during human history, the news, the media has been used obviously for propaganda purposes. The problem now is it's starting to become so subtle, it's so insidious that you almost don't even really see it happening or realize it's happening. So again, it's something we definitely want to just keep an eye on as well. It's so hard to kind of tell it apart nowadays anyway.
Also, the media have been controlled by regulations, ethical behavior, codes of conduct, whereas now you've got every single person able to post what could be propaganda.
It's, the game has changed. Yes.
I don't know if you heard of this also. Just 2 or 3 months ago, they told me about trying this with ChatGPT. It's just asking me to generate this image of I don't know what you call this in English. These people who cut the trees.
Yes. Yeah.
Tree fellas.
Yeah.
Okay, generate an image with this guy with no bear. It's impossible. I can't do it. I tried.
All those. It's all the biases. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Try.
That's why I said, so thanks for bringing up those examples, and yeah, try these things out. It is definitely something to be aware of. This is the territory getting into. So exactly this, when you start thinking about how you're going to use responsible AI techniques, you really want to start thinking carefully about toxicity. And this can be such a tricky topic to discuss, right? This is almost like saying, do we all believe in free speech? Yeah, but should all speech be free? I'm never going to answer that question, but you know what I'm talking about. We get into very tricky territory here, right? That's why it is really going to be tough to kind of standardize this stuff. I think what is important for us, though, for our own internal use cases for AI, to really start thinking about how we want to actually engage with this kid. We need to make sure that we've got our own responsibility standards that we set up for ourselves. At some point, there may be a regulation somewhere that catches up, but we probably need to stay ahead of that curve, right? Because I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Again, like I say, I'm an optimist, but with this is very hard to figure out. This is very hard to sort out. We also have to be careful about hallucinations. I think everyone has heard about this concept when you deal with an AI. When you ask an AI to give you a summary, to give you a response, it is very confident. It'll tell you, this is the answer. It may be the answer. Maybe it's not the answer. Right? So you have to be very, very conscious of that as well. It doesn't then mean that you have to double check absolutely everything that your AI is doing anytime it does it, but you have to be careful about what you're going to be using it for. So you can imagine that if you're using this to make a decision that starts to affect people's safety and well-being, you have to be very cautious about this kind of stuff. All right, so when it comes to IP, you also have to start thinking about the fact that you could potentially be, in a roundabout way, stealing someone's intellectual property, infringing on their rights. I know when it comes to generating media content, this is a very big concern we run into. For example, as a fun prompt, you can type, draw a picture of whatever, in the style of, insert artist name here. Sorry, go right ahead. I mean to, yeah. The question in chat again.
Yes.
Sorry, yeah. Sure. So again, in different parts of the world, there are government-backed regulations being introduced. There are also industry regulations being introduced. For example, in your financial markets and institutions, in the same way that they've got compliance regulations, we're starting to see AI compliance regulations being discussed. The point I'm trying to make, though, is we are probably a very far way away from having anything that's fit for purpose here in terms of an actual regulation. So that's why we almost need to kind of think about doing this ourselves. Right, so it's really important to think about what our responsibilities are. You do want to get your compliance team or compliance officers in that conversation if you've got them. So you do definitely want to make sure you're thinking about data privacy along the way. But it's more than just data privacy. You need to also start thinking about these other elements as well. Yeah. Right, so let's talk a little bit about unlocking the potential usage of responsible AI. So how can we use AI responsibly? First of all, for your own sake, for your organization's use case, you want to go ahead and create your own guidelines. The reason you need to do this is that there aren't really a fixed set of standards that we can actually use. I don't want to say you can't trust them, but you want to be careful about just blindly following whatever the AI responsibility guidelines are of one company versus another one. There was quite a big concern that was raised, I think it was sometime last year, where one of the big tech companies rephrased some of their responsible AI use cases to effectively work into this idea of being able to use their technology in military applications. Now, again, you have to think about that. Ethically, should we back a company that's using AI in a military application, using it, for example, for, let's say, drone strikes? I would get into another set of discussions. So if that drone strike takes place, are we saving more lives than we harming by implementing? See what I'm talking about there? I can't answer that question. People can, I think, but I can't. This is where it gets really, really tricky. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is that you need to kind of think about your customers, your own requirements, your values, and make sure that those are reflected in these policies. So we want to think about generating safe and expected outputs, put guardrails in place. So guardrails can essentially be ways to augment the solution. You can use techniques like negative prompting. You can use fine-tuning techniques to make sure that you don't get anything that's not really, suitable, that's not really available for you to utilize. Protect your data. Be very careful that while it's tempting to start using all of these tools and exchanging this data to get really good results, that you start leaking personal, private, and other information. And so, again, you want to think about compliance, you want to think about security. There are techniques you can use to protect your data. On the kind of more technical side of things, you could, again, start scrubbing that data, you can start anonymizing it, you can make sure that you engage with that generative AI solution in a way that you don't expose specific details. You can still get a lot of value out of it. Right, so bottom line here, start building your own responsible AI practices now. Don't wait. Don't wait until the regulations come, because they may not come anytime soon. And even if they do, who's actually going to set them up? This is where the thing comes in, right? Yeah, exactly. Let's say we talk about that banking example. So let's say that financial institution decides, hey, these are our kind of ethics that we're going to use. Then you may notice that they're not going to necessarily announce their changes, but they can change it. This is what you have to be very careful of. So start thinking about evolving attitudes. You have to start thinking about how that could potentially influence evolving global standards. You also want to think about the fact that technology is changing so rapidly that we have to almost revisit this on a continuous cycle. This is going to allow us to actually get our own organizational responsible AI standards developed. And of course, this is going to influence our organizational usage of generative AI. This is a direct feedback mechanism. In other words, it's a direct, kind of capability to tell you, listen, we're not actually getting the expected results we want. There are these concerns being raised. Let's revisit. So you're going to continuously be refining this. Right, but don't let this hold you back from starting to use it today. Use it and start developing these standards. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So is it advisable to use AI for AI, or does it just overwhelm like the AI chatbot?
No, it won't overwhelm it. So, for example, you have several use cases where you can actually utilize multiple AI tools together to actually get a more accurate result. It's a good example of that, where you can actually use specific foundational models that can actually rewrite your prompts for you. So again, you can use multiple tools together. One of the things you can do programmatically is you can, for example, set up your own custom agents. You can actually set up your own sequence of tools, your sequence of decision-making that you use. So you can combine multiple artificial intelligence foundational models together with your own external tools and even your own custom code. Right, so that's definitely something you want to do. In fact, that's going to give you a really, really targeted result there. But obviously, this does require developers to help you out. With that said, though, I'm going to show you a tool just now when we talk about Tidy Rock, where you can try and actually build the stuff without touching or writing code. So there's a coding movement at the moment, to see how it's going, called vibe coding. So we talk about vibing. So vibe coding is essentially the idea of generating code without knowing how to write code. So building applications without coding experience. So everyone, I hope you're all going to write a few applications this weekend. I'm going to show you where you can do it.
Definitely.
Cool.
The difference between systems and apps that are used for building code versus the low to no code apps. Is there a difference? Are there any pros and cons, or is it all just the same at the end of the day?
Let's put it this way. At the end of the day, you're going to have an application that performs a particular task for you. Where the differences could come in, you'll probably find if you're trying to fine-tune your application performance, where you're going to start getting some, really good experiences with your users. So where things aren't kind of slowed down. Making those kind of tweaks yourself is going to become really important. With that said, though, when you start using Gen AI assisted tools, one of their best use cases actually is to start looking at things like scanning your code to see whether or not you're introducing security vulnerabilities, or to actually automate the process of bug testing, bug fixing. But yeah, in answer to that, at the end of the day, you're still going to get an application result. I would say, though, that if you do want to start scaling out any application you build, you probably do want to go through a series of refinements. So you could use Gen AI to help you out with that. You may at some point need to get some actual, developer expertise going there as well. But you can go very far now. If you asked me the same question, if we had this discussion a year ago, I'd have told you It's in a very, very kind of initial state. We're not kind of there yet. The stuff I've been seeing over the last few months has been quite amazing, actually. Give me an idea around who's actually doing this kind of stuff. So I follow Amazon quite closely. I used to work at Amazon. Amazon currently, for pretty much all of their software projects, all of their maintenance projects for their different services and products, do everything using Gen AI. And in fact, what they found is that they've been able to free up their developers to do new work, to actually start looking at exploring new features, not being bogged down by doing things like optimization, bug fixing, and things like that. So it's not, just a case of us, playing around with this to see if we can build an app. This is being used by, some of the largest tech companies out there as well. So it's really come a far way. So in answer to the question in a nutshell, then, it's kind of the same at the end of the day. All right, so let's talk about some practical applications. So how can we really start coming up with a strategy to unlock the real value of artificial intelligence? This all sounds wonderful. We spent a bit of time talking about the tech here, but let's look at some practical applications. I don't want anyone to be offended by this statement here, because I've crossed it out. This is a sentiment you're going to hear out there, right? AI is going to take your job. No. I'm optimistic. I'm going to tell you it's going to change your job. And this is really a balance for you to take in this kind of stuff. I don't know if I'm going to have the same conversation with you next year. Maybe I'll be following my passion. So in my spare time, when I'm not delivering training or assisting customers with IT-related projects and workloads, I like to brew my own beer. So if you invite me back here again, I'll bring some beer for you to all sample. That's sometimes a questionable quality, but yeah. Right, but this is the point. AI is going to change the way we work, and this is definitely a big evolution we're looking at. It's really going to have a fundamental impact on society. I mean, it currently is already, and on the way that we start thinking about it. This is going to affect not just people. We have to start thinking about evolving processes. We have to think about the fact that it's heavily influenced by technology. It's also obviously going to have a big impact on data, both in terms of how we consume it, but also in terms of how we keep it. So, how can we actually start to take advantage of this internally? First of all, you want to be very, very clear and transparent with how you communicate, how you engage with your colleagues, how you engage with your workforce, how you engage with your customers. Again, you don't want to create this kind of feeling that there's just one small pilot group kind of doing this and everyone's out of the loop and we're doing this because we're going to replace everyone's jobs. It's about getting that transparency going, right? So be transparent, identify opportunities, look for use cases, look for actual business use cases where you can really unlock this. You also want to start thinking about upskilling your, yourself and upskilling your employees. So attend training. There's lots of free training courses out there. There's lots of YouTube videos. There's lots of paid for courses. Kabir will help us out with the paid for courses. But yeah, the point is that, yeah, you want to think about ways to improve your skills. And try and experiment. Don't get tied into this idea of using one machine learning approach, one, for example, Gen AI approach, and then you have a bad experience and you never touch it again. Play around. For example, for the next 6 months, you may find that a particular FM works really well for you. You may find that towards the end of the year, maybe it's not giving you what you want. Try something else. You need to be adaptable. I can tell you right now that when it comes to anything that's technology driven, I always tell people that in my IT career, I've been a chameleon. You have to change. You have to be adaptable. And yeah, you want to start thinking about creating guidance. Remember that these policies should speak to your own values, to your company's approach to doing things. You don't want to be too reliant on existing standards because there aren't really any existing standards. They're not exactly standardized. That's the point. Right, so you want to think about creating your own policies around stuff. Right, so some other tips over here. How could you use your data in a Gen AI solution? How could we make sure that we also keep it nice and locked down and secure? The point they're trying to make is that you could reuse an existing foundational model. So when you build out your own Gen AI application, if you take it to that point, you could, for example, decide to augment it with your existing data. It's really important that for auditing purposes, you log those interactions very carefully. because of course you don't want to actually have this falling into the wrong hands. In addition to that, you want to make sure that you continually, when you adapt to and build your new FMs, are monitoring how the model is performing. Remember, it doesn't just have to do with data privacy. It has to do with actually getting the result that you expect to. So that idea of how you could impact someone's life, how you could actually impact, someone in the real world. All right, so just a very simple magic quadrant diagram over there for us. 2 factors we consider here: feasibility and business impact. So obviously, if you go for something that's very feasible, but has low business impact, we could describe that as a quick win. Obviously, we may want to be more interested in going for something that's both feasible and has a high business impact. Right, so feasibility, you're thinking about what is the effort, all the complexity, or because of those 2 factors, the amount of time it takes you to actually develop something. Your business impact, of course, is the fact that it is measurable. Again, I hate to use the term, don't be upset with me, your KPIs, but that is important. It has to be something you can actually measure against. That's your key metric. And does this align with the goals that you're trying to achieve? So if we were to populate those quadrants over there, I would say that, yeah, if you're looking for those kind of potential quick wins, that's not a bad place to start. It's a good way to start building a bit of confidence. So you may find that you've taken something that requires a little bit of manual effort and you've kind of looked at ways to streamline or help start automating it. And again, just getting used to how you work with your Gen AI models. Ultimately, you could start looking at actual pilot projects, longer term investments in terms of things that are going to be high impact, but not necessarily that feasible initially to achieve. But this is where that real value will start to happen. Let me give you a few examples. And again, these are just against generic types of use cases. So for either streaming media companies or simple marketing requirements and so on. So low priority could be a case of saying we want to replace an existing AI or machine learning model that meets our requirements with Gen AI. We've all heard of the idea of reinventing the wheel. Yeah. The wheel works just fine. Let's rather spend time somewhere else. It's not to say we couldn't revisit that at some point, but you're not really actually getting really good impact out of doing something like that. What about something like this? Revise draft email messages. So automated, really boring, really mundane, repetitive type of task. What about assigning support tickets to queues automatically, auto-catching tickets when issues come up? Really good potential pilot project. So let's say that you're managing a large amount of media, whether it's movies or, for example, music or other types of documents. Naming and identifying microgenres. Writing movie synopses. So we can adapt that to other types of requirements as well. Creating good summaries. And not just a summary of the documents in our collection, but actually giving us real natural language insights into it. We can search through the documents. Which of these documents relate to math? Which of them relate to the topic? AI. Which of them relate to training I attended at the Spanish Chamber of Commerce? So again, you can actually start getting that kind of insight over there. Longer term opportunities as well. These may require additional complexity, especially when you do fine tuning. You start maybe identifying opportunities to build your own FMs, but again, they could potentially unlock lots of business value. All right, so that is what I wanted to discuss with everyone today. We have time for questions, I think. Yeah. Feel free. Before we also end up over here with what I've shown you, I do want to do a quick demonstration for you as well on Party Rock. If you've got your laptops available, use them. If you don't, check it out later when you do have one available to you. And we can try it out. Yeah. Yeah, I'll leave the password over there. Questions for now, yeah. Right, so let's go try our Party. We're going to hear.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I would like to ask regarding building our own AIs. So does that mean, actually the question is based on the data lake. So does that mean that like the data lake that we maybe ought to use as the something that is cost effective to build on, like maybe Amazon S3 or maybe Azure?
Yeah, so
or will that
go ahead, yeah.
no, it's fine. You can continue.
Sure. Yeah. Remember that when we're thinking about foundational models,
Yes.
we are thinking about either just using them as is. We could augment them with fine tuning. So one of the ways you could fine tune it is you could take your data that you have in a data lake or in a data warehouse. Sometimes you use the term a lake house. So it's a combination of a data lake and a warehouse. And you could use that data to actually augment that foundational model. Now, to do something like that, you wouldn't normally just leave the data in place in that location. What you would do is you'd actually pull out the specific detailed data that you want from that data lake. Typically, to speed up your process, you would put it into a database so you can do really fast lookups. Remember, the benefit of a data lake itself is the fact that it can store vast quantities of data. But the time it takes to retrieve and analyze the data is normally a little bit slower compared to if you put it into a warehouse or if you put it into an actual database. But yeah, to answer your question, there definitely is a tie-in over here. Another thing to consider is you could use your data lake as the source training data for helping to build your own foundational model.
Okay. No, thank you.
Right, everyone. So, is it okay? You don't mind if I open up a web browser here? No, great. Cool. Great. You just do that. Just start this presentation for now. We're sharing the screen, right? Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you something.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah. Well,
We talked a little outside of the coffee. What models would you recommend to generate spreadsheets and Python code?
So, if you want to programmatically start generating content, you could start looking at either doing it purely with code. So the first approach you could take is you could decide to use a coding assistant. Funnily enough, Microsoft have a code generator AI tool, also called Copilot. So you can actually plug it into your development environment. You can actually start typing either a few lines of code or actually putting in some comments to Python. But you can also do it in a chat interface. So, for example, you can use a command line version of Copilot. But about a few weeks ago, which was kind of the first week of June, Google released Gemini CLI. With Gemini CLI, you can actually directly in your command line interface actually get it to start generating some code for you. A tool that I use very often is a tool or service offered by Amazon, AWS specifically, and it's called QDeveloper. So QDeveloper is a tool you can download and install. Again, you invoke it from the CLI. You literally just type the command QChat, and then you start telling Q what it is you want it to build. So I would like to build an application that does the following. And you can choose the runtime you want to use. You can choose the framework you want to use. You can choose to run it locally. You can choose to deploy it to a third-party cloud provider, customize it in any number of ways. If we have a bit of time, I'll see if I can't just show that to you quickly. I just need to kind of get my laptop onto the screen. But otherwise, yeah, let me show this to you to start with, because this is a good starting point, I would say.
The spreadsheet's the same.
100%. So that's the thing, is that you solve a problem like that. You're going to find that Python's going to have several third-party modules or libraries that can do exactly that kind of thing. So, for example, one of the ways you can solve that is I want to import data from whatever source and just export that as a native spreadsheet. Or, for example, I want to go ahead and start manipulating elements of that data using Python. So, yeah, using a code generative or code generating AI would be the way to go.
Pilot CLA.
So Copilot, yeah, so that would be the Microsoft Copilot, and the one from AWS is QDeveloper. The one from Google, also based on their Gemini AI product, is Gemini CLI. Sorry, yeah. Oh, so I've got another complication.
No, Sarah, then the people online won't see.
So let me show Party Rock for now, and yeah, as an extended, then I'll I'll just share some, I don't know if we can get a maybe in this going. I'll share some links to some resources for you. I should have actually put that together already, sorry. But yeah, just some stuff to go and check out. And remember, if we have this conversation in a month from now, there could be new stuff we discover. And yeah, share it with each other. You know, I can tell you right now that you've probably all come across a tool that I've never heard of. Yeah, and that's what you want, that kind of shared experience, you know. Yeah. Right, so if you can, go and check out partyrock.aws. There are actually lots of sites that are starting to do this kind of stuff. And it's a really fun way to just start seeing what you can actually do with artificial intelligence. So what we're doing here is we're basically using this to start developing our own applications. But we're developing them without writing a single line of code. Sounds too good to be true? Let's try it out. So you can sign up for free. You just go ahead and sign in with any of the, the usual kind of socials if you want to. I'll skip this for now. Sorry, because this is someone else's Mac, so I don't want to mess around too much here. So just go to partyrock.aws.
TKI.
Partyrock.aws.
IAC.
TKI. You need to also put TKI.
Let me also just put it up here, maybe if there's a text editor or something. But yeah, it's literally just what you see there, Partyrock. So just as the website, partyrock.aws. This will have certain limitations, I would say. There are tools you can use to build online stores, though. I mean, there are a few different approaches you could take. One, you could build your own solution from scratch. And you also have to start thinking about, how you're going to do things like processing payments, how you're going to, for example, validate to prove that, this is a trustworthy business and so on. So one of the things you could do is you could build this from scratch if you wanted to, or you could decide you're going to use AI to build some of the components that you can engage with those different platforms with. Yeah. But yeah, so the short answer to that question is yes, but with PartyRock, well, we can see, we can try it. We can try that with the prompt. Right, so just to show you what you're already doing here with PartyRock, you can actually go and browse a number of existing apps that have already been generated. You can also create your own. So yeah, let's try and create an application. I think I have to sign in to create an app though, that's the only thing. Okay, so I don't want to sign in for now, but let me give everyone an assignment. This is going to sound like a weird thing to do. And email contact details up over here as well. Please tell me what your experience is if you'd like to share it. Actually, try that prompt out. So you can literally go and type, this is what I'd like to do. So let me show you the kind of stuff we can do. Someone mentioned this already. I can tell you right now that my resume is normally really bad. I think I make the same mistake everyone else does with the resume, especially when I apply for a job or a post, right? My resume is going to be listed in chronological order. So at the top of it, it'll be education. This is the school I went to. This is and we should never do it like that, right? We should always customize a resume for every different job that we apply for. So this is exactly what this is going to do. So look at just an existing app that someone built here. And this is just built using this tool. This is not, something that was generated by AWS. This is actually just one of the top submissions so far. So a lot of this is just text processing, but look at how clever this is. In other words, what job are you applying for? Take the job spec, pop it in there. What you then do is put in your resume input, go to resume, and you're going to start seeing, it's going to start saying, hey, improvement factors, things you can do, ways to optimize, and even give you additional advice on what you should be looking to do. A little bit of fun, So, yeah, like I said, I don't want to kind of get into weird spaces with signing in and stuff like that. But if you sign in, you'll see that this unlocks the option for you to go and generate your own app. And you can start with a basic prompt. This is a good way to, again, just practice what we spoke about with prompt engineering. So what if you said, and we can use that example, it's a good one. What if you said in the example, I would like to build an online store? Now, you're going to get a result, I'm sure, but do you agree that's probably quite vague, right? So you'd want to refine that specifically for your use case. So what is your online store going to do? What types of features would you like to include? And so on and so forth. And this is kind of getting into territory. I'll be honest with you, if PartyRock does something really amazing with that, I will be impressed. Because, I mean, it's designed to kind of just get you started with this idea. But you could do exactly the same thing with a tool like Q for developers, or you could do something like that with Gemini CLI. So in the same way that we could use that tool for programmatically trying to interact with Excel or generate Excel documents and so on, we could do the same thing, for example, to generate that website. Yeah. So you don't have to use Python. You could use anything you want to. Yeah. Very, very cool. So yeah, just some other options that they've got over there. They've got some image options here as well. So you can also generate apps that are image kind of generated or image based. F1 helmet designer, this is pretty cool. I like to watch the F1 every now and then. I'm more of a MotoGP fan, I'll be honest with you. But yeah, helmet design description. Guy with big glasses and beard. Doesn't sound like anyone on it. Helmet mockup, so you can actually just go ahead and play to run the above app over there. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, so I guess sorry, yeah. So again, I don't want to get into this, signing or something. Yeah.
Sign in.
I'll sign in. Let's try it on. Okay, if you don't mind. Is that okay? Is that okay?
Sign in. It's fine.
You were talking about privacy, and now we just but
it's your account. You're okay with it.
It's fine.
The top one, is that okay? There won't be any kind of cost or anything like that. It's just, yeah.
You just get advertising. You get
advertising. On your behalf to them. Thank you. Interesting. Yeah. All right. Let's just give it a chance to sign us in there. Cool. So yeah, when you sign in, you can just give yourself a username. SAU. Yeah. Cool. We'll just leave it like that. I'm not going to opt you in to receive stuff from Amazon though. Oh, okay. Are we human? The Turing test, huh? Yes, the imitation game. Which is a chair? That's a chair? That's a chair. That's a chair. That's kind of a chair, but it looks weird, huh? I think. That's a chair. I normally have to do 2 or 3 of those, so I don't know what that means, but yeah.
Are you human?
Okay, let's give it a go. Oh, I don't see it if it gave us an error message or not. Let's try that again. Sorry. Something like that. Oh, there we go. Sorry, it just took a bit of time. Okay. Boom. Generate. Let's see. Again, that's a terrible idea of a of a prompt, right? So super vague. But again, this is where you can kind of start getting, a little bit more detail going. This is kind of what I'm talking about, trying out different prompts. Now, if you signed in, we can also try and build our own app as well. So we can try, we'll try your suggestion. Why not? Let's see what it does. And that's kind of almost the approach you want to have with this stuff. So don't be afraid to experiment. Obviously, if you are using a foundational model where there's cost associated, you do want to be aware of cost.
Yeah.
But that's why I like using tools like this. So hey,
looks like you.
When I was much younger and I was a bit thinner, my neck isn't quite that sleek. But yeah. Okay, I'll take it. Yeah. I can maybe say, okay, but now I've also got big curly hair and play around with it. But yeah, just have a bit of fun with this. So let's maybe go and build that app. So let's do this. Generate app. And there are a few ways you can do this. Go at the prompt, or you can go ahead and decide, you want to build this manually. So you can add additional components as you go. So I'm going to do this. Let's maybe give it a bit more direction. So build an e-commerce website. So it's spelled e-commerce, but it should help you out with that anyway. That is suitable for secure transactions. Site will sell. I'm going to just say something there. So we can say sell caps. Sure that customers sign in and use an MFA that's authentication. Yeah. Now, I don't expect we're going to get a lot of joy out of something like this because we're getting a little bit too outside of what it's going to be able to help us out with. But let's see what it does. Now look at how clever that is. Just a little bit of processing. So cap secure, e-commerce security info, email address, password, authentication, MFA code, MFA verification. And they're going to include details, including cap style, cap color. So it's starting to approximate the kind of stuff that you'd want to actually go ahead and build out over there. It's thinking, it's thinking, it's thinking. The payment info, order summary. It's going a lot further than I thought it would.
Yeah.
Again, I keep saying I'm an optimist, but I'm being very doubtful over here. So, yeah. But it's interesting to try the same experiments using an actual, purpose-built code generating tool. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so can I please ask, for example, I don't have much knowledge about AI.
Sure.
And the information that I received today, for me, it's overwhelming because I don't know much of the things that are happening.
Sure.
So is there any kind of help that we can get on how to actually learn how to use AI, maybe step by step, in order for me to understand all the...
So a good starting point is, you'll see that in this particular tool itself. If you just decide you're going to start with something like this, they've got a feature called Backstage, and literally what they've got here, if you go backstage, it's all of those details. So you can just jump in and start building stuff, but you can also go through the tutorials here. The same could be said for pretty much any of the AI tools that you're going to access. So they normally have built-in tutorials. They've also typically, if you just go and spend time on YouTube, there are tons of videos. It's almost a bit overwhelming. So one of the challenges is that, it's fine to know that there are tutorials, there's help out there, but where should you start? I don't have, and normally I'm quite good at generating or creating curated lists of content for other stuff that I present. I don't exactly have something specifically to help you with getting started. I can help you with more intermediate stuff. So if you want to get really into the world of generative AI, machine learning, deep learning, go and check out deeplearning.ai. There are some introductory courses there. For example, they're going to start you with the basics such as how do you start generating code or interacting with AIs using code? And they can almost kind of take you from absolute basics to help you out with that. But there are also other short courses that look at more specific types of tasks. So deeplearning.ai, by the way, is actually the site by probably one of the most important thought leaders in the world of artificial intelligence, a researcher, scientist by the name of Andrew N. NG is his last name, so Andrew N. Very effective speaker and really communicates ideas super clearly. And yeah, just a really good resource to go and use in general. I'll see if I can get something a little bit more, more useful for you. So maybe just a kind of a curated list of things to go and check out. Remember though, that because it's such a fast changing space, we don't know if there's going to be a new, really useful learning resource that's made available. And that's why I say I encourage everyone on this call, everyone in this group. These are really good contacts that we can make in a situation like this. We will share these things we find out from each other. Absolutely.
And there are TED Talks also.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
You go, absolutely. Yeah.
TED Talk. Yeah, so it's just literally someone.
And so here's our app. Now, you'll see over there that they've kind of mocked up this idea. So they're kind of showing you, well, this is almost like the process you'd go through if you were to sign up and then you can place your order and all of that. That's why I say it's not exactly something that's fit for purpose. But you can get an idea of, just based on that basic prompts, I can start to build out these kind of structures over here. Yeah, so this for me is just a really fun way just to start, playing around a bit with prompting, seeing, well, if I try and build an app again, but maybe change the prompts, I can, for example, start to get a slightly different result. Yeah, so like I said, the other thing to go and check out, go and look at Gemini CLI, go and look at developer. One thing is that you'll notice that with this training, I've tried to avoid getting too vendor specific, stuff that I've mentioned, although I've just showed you two Amazon websites. but the point I'm trying to say is that, yeah, be open to trying out ideas. So again, there are a lot of really big tech companies that are doing some amazing stuff in the space. But yeah, my general advice to anyone with tech as well in general is it's good to be passionate about a particular tech vendor that you follow. But remember, it's not something you have to just stick to for the rest of your life. Be adaptable, be open to trying out things. But yeah, Q Developer is super cool. What I really love about it is there is a free tier available. So again, I'm always thinking about cost. I'm always thinking about the small business owner, thinking about the the startup, and you can actually get a lot done with that free tier offering over there. So the installation steps are going to require a little bit of tech, but once you've got them up and running, you're just going to have that simple chat interface, and from there you just go through those chat prompts and start building stuff. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So I've been playing with it.
Okay, cool.
And I've been asking it to generate images for me based on a theme we're going to launch soon in our business, which is a clothing brand. So I have a Spanish clothing brand called Desigual, which is premium clothing.
Right.
It's not fast fashion.
Yes, yes.
We're going to be doing a series of posts about, the impact of fast fashion on the environment versus buying premium clothing. Anyway, it's generated some very nice images, but now are they images that I can then actually use, or is it someone's photo somewhere that I'm going to be sued?
So this is the amazing thing.
It's generative, so you generated something new. It doesn't exist. That image doesn't exist anywhere else.
Really.
Yes.
Actually.
Technical term that you use, what you've just done is you synthesized an image, which literally means you're creating this from scratch. But now, with that said, this is where the problem is going to start coming in. There are already, cases of court battles and stuff that have started up where someone starts saying, but that synthesized image is imitating my style. But now, how do you classify IP, right? Is it style versus the actual image?
Hectic.
But I mean, we've been having that conversation, I think, for hundreds of years. Yeah. Think about, you can have the original picture in whichever museum it's in, and you can have it printed in how many magazines and people's T-shirts, and it gets into that whole thing. Remember that whole NFT thing that happened? Like that but it's exactly that, right?
Maybe you keep the prompt. If you save and keep the prompt, you can prove that it's not creating.
This is the thing. And you can do that. You can do reverse image searches, for example. So an example of an AI service that Google uses, you could use Google Lens. So you could, for example, get Google Lens to say, from this reverse image search, am I good? Is there, for example, enough similarity potentially out of other images you find in where there could be a concern around IP? But it's such a slippery slope, that as well. I, for example, have seen a lot of designers that get sued years after the fact, because it turns out that designs they've come up with, they've actually gotten from websites that kind of have either Creative Commons or other kinds of license agreements. But because you ever used that artwork, didn't give that accreditation, they got into hot water. So I know exactly where your question is coming from there, where, can you use it? So yes, you can. I wouldn't be too worried about proceeding with too much caution, but this is also very interesting, territory you're getting into. Yeah. So one of the experiments I tried, I took my 8-year-old nephew's paintings that he did at school, and I kind of ran them through a few image generators. So what's kind of cool with those is instead of just creating an image from scratch, you can take an existing image and you can actually include it or enhance it. And I said, please redraw this artwork in the style of, and just play around with different artists and stuff. Interesting. Yeah.
But I'm asking it to pull a piece of clothing from my website, and it's not.
Okay, now, certain tools or certain foundational models you're going to work with, you just directly have the ability to go online and do stuff like that. Others either require permission for you to do it or just don't support that functionality. So it depends on the tool that you're using.
Would there be functionality to put a product in here because it's generated a forest?
Yeah.
And then the idea is to have someone in the forest wearing that. But could I say put clothes in this image?
Put this in this setting. So exactly that kind of problem you can solve. Imagine that you wanted to, showcase your product as a photo shoot at a really famous location, like in front of whatever it is. Instead of literally jumping in a plane, flying and doing the photo shoot, this is exactly the kind of thing you can do.
Oh, it looks quite amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So what I'll do, just some follow-ups from my side. I'll see if I don't know how we're going to communicate it through. Can I send some stuff to you? Have you got a list of the attendees?
Yes.
In theory, I should have as well. Yeah, I haven't done any of my admin work, so let me do that now as well. So I should have a list of attendees as well. So I just need to mark everyone's attendance. I'm going to do that quickly now. And we do have a course feedback site as well. So I'm going to see if I can get that course feedback. I think there. Yeah. Let me see if I can find that quickly. Yeah. Just grab it over here. Right, but then what I'll do is, as a kind of an action from my side, I'll just send you some of those resources over there. So yeah.
AI, that's your version of shit.
Because AI is busy with.
But it's obviously not my piece, but when it's got it from somewhere, it does look like something. And then that's the fast fashion.
I think we need to, Matthew, I think we need to do a closing because obviously the people online are.
Yeah. Let's do a closing. Yeah. So sorry.
And we'll share the resources. That who's participate.
I just want to get this evaluation and then we can do a closing. So yeah, it's free. Sorry, can I ask you just to give me a hand? Sorry, everyone. That's actually the first time I worked with Kabir for many years before. This is the first time I've engaged with Kabir for the group at Koenig. So yeah. Just bear with me. Sorry.
No worries.
This will take a minute. So that's your 10.
Interesante.
Okay. Let's just do that. Don't worry about my very bad admin capabilities. Thanks everyone for your time. It was really wonderful meeting you. Please hand about to obviously physically present. I think we are scheduled to have finished already about 20 minutes ago. So yeah, but let's keep it moving. One good suggestion we had is WhatsApp group. If everyone's keen, I've got no issues, getting on board with that. I think to kind of get that going. Who wants to volunteer to start the WhatsApp group? And we can start WhatsApping them.
I nominate her.
Who's good at WhatsApp groups?
So I don't want to be on a WhatsApp group.
You don't have to. That's purely opting. Yeah.
Yes, I would love to give you my card. So
okay, cool. I already got your card.
So you can get in touch with me.
Is all those additional action points we're going to follow up on. I'll send
we'll share.
Yeah.
And if we just give everyone my contact details in case you can get them the first time round. Sorry. Then I'm very short, very briefly. Just do this. So yeah, for anything that you're kind of interested in, if you have any follow-up questions, if there's something that you kind of come across and you find interesting, please let me know. I love getting questions. I love getting some additional suggestions from people. This is a good way for me to learn as well. And then yeah, we'll share out the valuation link or the feedback link. That's super important as well. So yeah, this is actually the first time I've presented this particular version of this. So I'm very interested to hear what everyone thinks about it. And yeah, obviously, just like we do with machine learning and with AI, refine. Yeah. Cool. Thanks. That's it. Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah, we're done.
Just say thank you. And
so yeah, thanks for all our remote attendees. I'm going to just stop sharing my screen for now. And yeah, I'm going to drop off the call. So thanks again. We've got a lot of people saying thank you very much on the call. Thanks everyone.